Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome to another TechStrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Tuesday, March 1st, my favorite month. And it's not just because of St. Patrick's Day, it's because of March Madness. I'm so excited about that. I'm so excited about St. Patrick's Day too, coming up quickly, even though I can't wear green because, green screen. But anyway, we've got a great TechStrong TV broadcast today. Lots of great interviews. We kick things off with a conversation between Alan and Alon Giramonski, who is the CEO and co-founder of Up9. Up9 has recently announced the availability of Mizu, which is an open source API traffic viewer for Kubernetes maintained. Mizu is a pretty nifty technology. It helps developers troubleshoot problems and get to the root cause in their Kubernetes applications, and they use it by unpacking microservices communication, and they have a lot of support for modern products or protocols that are commonly used in applications such as REST and gRPC, Kafka, Redis, and RabbitMQ. Great technology, and it's a great conversation, so I do highly recommend you check it out. After that, Alan's got a conversation with Caroline Wong, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt and author, and they talk about her brand new book. It's called the PtaaS book, The A to Z of Pen Test as a Service, and it explores everything you need to know about pen test as a service in today's cybersecurity threat landscape. Great topic, and Caroline is always fun to talk to, so this is definitely a conversation worth checking out. After that, we have the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part 2 of a 2-part conversation that Mike Jones has with Mary Galloway, who's the CEO and a founding board member for the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu. She and I spoke a couple months ago, and I thought she was so dynamic that I introduced her over to Mike Jones, and he thought so as well. So this conversation ensued. Cyberjitsu is one of the fastest growing 501c3 nonprofit cybersecurity communities that is dedicated to bringing more women and girls to cyber. So Mary and Mike talk about that, as well as other cybersecurity initiatives going on, and obviously the state of the Cybersecurity Union. So it's a great conversation, as always. Definitely want to check that one out as well. We ran part 1 yesterday, so check out both of them. All right, after that, we have our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. This one features John Willis from Red Hat. He's got a presentation titled 4 Lenses to Better Understand DevSecOps. And he takes a look at some of the teachings of Deming in how organizations can, how to apply those learnings to DevSecOps. We've got so many things happening in the DevSecOps space, so John does a really great job of kind of parsing through it all and basically giving a primer for organizations in understanding where they need to really be focusing their efforts on when they are considering adopting DevSecOps. Great presentation. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I have a conversation with Tony Mendoza, who is the Senior Director of IT over at SpectraLogic. Now, SpectraLogic recently was attacked, victim of a ransomware attack, and normally a lot of organizations, if they are victimized, they don't like to talk about it, they don't want to get it out, but SpectraLogic thought differently. They figured if they were able to get through it, then they could actually help other companies by telling them how they got through it, and hopefully provide some takeaways for organizations as they're doing any planning associated with getting back on their feet from a ransomware attack. It's some of the tools and tactics that SpectraLogic used to get through it, including, data storage is a huge element there. So Tony kind of walks me through what they went through and how organizations can better prepare themselves based on what they learned. It's a great conversation. After that, I've got the webinars preview for you, and then we have the View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard is speaking with Alex Rice, who was the CTO of HackerOne, and Jonathan Hunt, who was the Vice President of Security at GitLab. And together, they all explain why application security tools need to become a continuous DevSec process, and how application security in general needs to become a DevSecOps process. Great conversation there between the three of them. All right, that's today's lineup, and it's a good one, folks. I hope you can stick around for all of it. We're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages. All right, we are back and kicking things off on TechStrong TV. Today is a conversation between Alan and Alon Germansky, who is the CEO and co-founder over at Up9. They talk about Up9's new service, Mizu, which is an open source API traffic viewer for Kubernetes maintained. It's a great technology and certainly one for a lot of cloud native environments that don't have visibility, and especially visibility into their API traffic, which is so important. It's a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another segment here on TechStrong TV. Happy to be joined by my friend Alon Germansky, returning to us here at TechStrong TV from UP9 Up9. Hey Alon, how are you?
I'm doing good, Alan. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's nice to see you in an office, it looks like there, with a whiteboard and a door and very industrial looking, and that's a sign of the times. Good for you.
I've been waiting, like all of us, for more than 2 years to get back to an office environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Alon, before we jump into today's news, which I think is exciting, let's just make sure, of course, you've been on our show many times. We've covered Up9, but there are people out here who are not familiar. Why don't we give them a little Up9 story and maybe a little of your background?
Sure. So let's start with Up9 and then kind of go to my background. Up9 is a new company that me and my team have founded over the past couple of years. And it's all about microservices, APIs, the new era of cloud native. I think we can all agree that cloud native is basically changing everything, like there was before cloud native, and then there is the future. So we are focusing on enabling microservices developers to develop quickly, find problems, and go to market faster.
Yep. And just, by way of introduction and background, you, of course, were also the founder of BlazeMeter, open source based testing that was acquired by CA Technologies, Broadcom, and then spun out and acquired by Perforce most recently, and still providing great service and value. But really the key I want to bring out from that, Alon, is that your involvement in the open source community runs deep. Your roots run deep here. The businesses you've been involved with have been just really, intertwined with the open source community. And, as such, there are people who understand that the open source, when you're working as a commercial entity with the open source community, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? It's not a parasitic relationship where it's all take. It's symbiotic. One helps the other, and they help each other. And that, of course, is the key to success with open source, business models and so forth. And, you are a walking billboard for that success. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
That kind of brings us, though, to today's announcement. Why don't you, if you don't mind, share with the audience?
Yeah. By the way, I always wanted to be a billboard, but
A walking billboard.
And the walking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but you're correct. So my previous company, BlazeMeter, and again, it's the same team for BlazeMeter. Over the years, we've developed several open source, developed or contributed to several open source projects. Many of them became the most popular ones in their field. You know, back then it was JMeter and Taurus and WireMock. And today it's basically the announcement of a new open source project named Mizu, right? I'm a true believer that open source, like 10 years ago, open source was the poor man's solution, the free option when you compare it to the commercial bells and whistles, commercial offerings. But, you know, if we fast forward the past 10 years, two things have happened. First, developers have become far more important to today's organizations, and developers consume open source, right? There is a specific reason for that. Open source is the most tangible experience you can get. I want it now. I can download it and run it now. I don't need to go through hoops, through salespeople, through sales processes to actually experience any product that I'm using. Vendor dependency or lack of, the absence of. There's no, when you adopt open source, it's like an insurance policy, right? Where I can use it, and if I like the vendor, great. If not, you know, I can still stick with the open source. The thing is that if open source is the best way to start a relationship with a new vendor, because there's no dependency, it's very quick to trial, right, and use. Open source is becoming the first-class citizen in software development. So companies, I think, this is my personal belief, that over the years have invested a lot in open source, far more than in the past. If in the past it was backed by organizations like Apache and other kind of non-profit organizations, today open source is being backed by vendors, right? So almost every open source project has a company behind it, right? And there are certain rules you cannot bypass, like you cannot put a Trojan horse or something that will trap people to use your service. It's a true project that is provide full value, but usually there's additional commercial value if you adopt an enterprise version of such. Okay, so again, this is kind of my theory around open source. And as we said today, I want to introduce Mizu, right? Mm-hmm. And Mizu has a funny story to it, or a cute story to it. It's kind of, I want to say, hey, I woke up one morning, or one of my team members woke up one morning and they had this great idea, that ended up being Mizu. That's not the case.
Very rarely is. Go ahead.
Yeah, we were developing something, something in one direction, building a lot of technology, a lot of intellectual property to it, right? And then we saw where people get excited, which came as a surprise to us, right? And I'm going to show Mizu in a second, so you'll know more about what I'm talking about. But what led to this new project is the fact that people got so excited about that certain use case, and we say, what's going on here? This is a commodity. This is not something important. Then we realize in the cloud native environment, in Kubernetes environment, this capability is absent. It's not there. A capability that was one. And the capability is basically being able to troubleshoot an application by simply viewing the traffic, inspecting the traffic. We used to do it so many times in the past. Every developer remembers right-clicking the Chrome DevTools, right, and seeing the network traffic, using Wireshark, using TCP dump, Fiddler, other tools that give you what's going on inside the traffic, what's the API payload to find the needle in the haystack. When you go into Kubernetes, that doesn't exist.
No.
Right? And we said, okay, that's cool. Why don't we, if there is a specific use to this and we want to serve, we want to provide value, right? If there is a specific use only for that, to being able to see traffic, where currently you can't, let's carve this piece of technology from a big product, package it as a standalone tool, and contribute it to open source with an Apache license to use, so it's true open source and everyone is able to use it.
Yep. So, but it begs the question, why wasn't there something for Kubernetes? What is specific about Kubernetes that made this such a must-have, right? And the answer in my mind is, it's the way the microservices. When we talk about you talk about Kubernetes, you're running them, in a container environment, whether it's serverless or whatever. It's a container environment. Kubernetes is the orchestrator. So you have all of these containers, and in many cases, it's really what it is microservices, right? And you have all these microservices running, but they're dependent, right, on each other in terms of timing, functionality, everything else. And that communication in a microservices architecture versus a monolith, I mean, the complexity, especially, it's one thing you got 2 microservices, 5 microservices, all right. But when you got dozens, let alone, hundreds, it's a job, right? It's not something, it's a job. And I suspect, and that's what, quite frankly, Kubernetes can be difficult to deal with, as you know. I suspect that's why we probably haven't seen any sort of thing like Mizu here, right? That can tackle this.
Yeah, I think you got it exactly right. I think that cloud native and Kubernetes specifically both introduce new set of challenges. And think about what happened in the past couple of years. The introduction of cloud native was very quick, very surprising. It took Amazon and the public cloud 10 years from 2008 to mid, somewhere in the past decade to become standard de facto. And we thought Kubernetes will take yet another 10 years, but no.
3 years.
COVID, exactly. It's simply there.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you a better one. Look, you've been around a long time. Think back when was the first time you saw hypervisors? Right? VMware or some of the open source hope. Yeah, it was late 90s.
Even, yeah.
You didn't really see it. Well, 2005, we started seeing cloud. And then, there was this whole public versus private cloud thing. But we were talking about hypervisors, whether it was private or public. And whether it was VMware. I mean, look, VMware was a shootout from EMC, right? It wound up being bigger. But, it wasn't until around 2000, it took almost 10 years for the hypervisor, right, to become a dominant sort of platform, right? And without the hypervisor, you wouldn't have cloud, right?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was probably cut in 2/3 in Kubernetes, right? 2/3 faster, 66% faster. And now, I mean, the last numbers I saw, 75-80% of all new payloads on Amazon are Kubernetes-based. Instances, not payloads, instances.
I agree. I further agree, which is very much unique for this time, that the one thing that kind of pushed everything super fast forward is actually COVID and 2020, right? Mm-hmm. It's either you're digital
or you're dead. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, enough people died, unfortunately. We were talking off camera, but it's true. But here's the thing. I've been in technology a long time. Yes, COVID was a great accelerator. But just because COVID will ease up or we go back to some new normal doesn't mean we're going to turn the clock back, right? It accelerates and we go from there. Alon, we don't have all day, as much as I'd love to talk to you all day. One of the knocks always on open source tools is how easy is it to use? What kind of interface does it have? Right? Can I use it? Do I need to buy the enterprise version or can I use the open source, right? If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you if you could pull up maybe a screenshot, or not a screen, if you can log in, whatever you want to do best. Show us what Mizu's about.
Alan, soon you're going to ask me for a PowerPoint deck. This is not how.
No, I don't want a PowerPoint. The world sees enough PowerPoints.
No, of course.
Let's go in.
But I'll show you in a second, and I'll, while I'm sharing my screen and getting ready to present, let's discuss the alternatives. Okay.
I just want to mention before we go, we didn't rehearse this or anything. I'm hoping I hope I didn't put you in a bad spot, Alon. But go ahead, discuss the alternatives.
Listen, it's the most fun spot I am. I need to, things need to work. Everything. Okay. It could be a perfect storm.
It's live TV, right? So
exactly.
We'll do it.
I wouldn't have it any other way. But let's think about API observability, a theme we both like very much, right? So today, to understand what's going on inside your cluster, you have to instrument code with other tools. You have to use either an SDK or instrument code. Therefore, you need a developer to do that. And the more services you have, the bigger clusters you have, the more developer time you need. Any code requires maintenance, and the list goes on. It impacts scalability. Okay? Now, here comes Mizu. Let's say I have a clean slate, right? I just heard of Mizu. I'm going to this open source project of Up9. And then I'm going to the release page to download. So I'm copying this one line. And remember, there was nothing before. No developers are here. You don't see any code editor. I'm going to my console and I'm pasting the command I just copied from the website and I'm running it. Behind the scene, this downloads a small utility that communicates with the Kubernetes APIs. So there's no installation, right? It's simply the entire operation is by communicating with Kubernetes and asking Kubernetes to allow us to listen in to the network layer. Okay, that would be kind of first thing. So I just downloaded it. I haven't installed anything, and I'm running it. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Right? This is a live demo. Okay. It communicates with Kubernetes. It found Kubernetes. These are the pods. You see the UI that opens up. Okay, you actually see 45 pods are being tapped. You act on the left.
Wow.
This is the traffic. This is the real traffic that goes inside Kubernetes. Okay.
Let's just be clear. We're not on like a third party site. We're not hacking anyone here.
No.
Okay.
I don't
want us all to go away for this a lot.
Don't worry about it. No, I'm running my own Kubernetes cluster in GKE. Okay. And I'm using Mizu, the open source tool that I've downloaded, to communicate with that cluster, ask to tap into the network level. As you can see, there are multiple protocols here. Like there's obviously the HTTP protocol. I can see the request. I can see the response, right? There is Kafka, right? Again, request, response. What else do we have here? AMQP is RabbitMQ. Okay. Redis. Okay. So what it does, not only that it taps the network layer to extract the traffic, the packets, it also deciphers the packets and basically decrypt any encryption that is there and unpacks any language, any protocol that is there. Okay, obviously modern protocols. So this is kind of the basic capability of Mizu. It's everything is in real time. As you can see, no coding. Any number of services, like this time around, I have 45 different services. But if my cluster were to have 450 or 4,000, if I had multiple clusters, I can easily go in and see everything or see only a chunk of it, right? I can further, like, let's say I want to find something, right? There's a lot of traffic here. Think about terabytes of traffic. Let's say I want to find all the API entries of a certain API. So I'm pressing the plus here, see? And then I want, with response status 200. I want to see only those. So now I'm seeing only those APIs.
Right.
And here's a quick trick. Let's do 400 here. So now I will find only those with 400. Oh, obviously I don't have any. But if at any point in time I would have a faulty API, I would see it here. Right.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. And this is the total free version here. No tricks, no nothing. This is what people get when they download just this little plugin and use the free open source version.
So a couple of things. First, definitely, yes. This is you just saw the entire thing. It's kind of
right. There's no smoke and mirrors.
No smoke. The only thing is there are more. There is more. Like this thing.
But wait, there's more. Okay.
See? These are the service dependencies.
Nice.
Right? As they are inferred from traffic.
And there's also the open source version.
Everything I just presented is pure open source.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. It's
beautiful. All right. So where do people go to get this?
They can go to two places. They can go to GitHub, right, to Up9 Mizu. They can simply, the best way to do it, because you don't always remember what I usually do to find, I type in Kubernetes, right, traffic viewer, for example, right, and here it is.
Very cool.
Okay.
Very good. Excellent, man. And it's available now.
It is available now. We've just released, the latest and greatest a few hours ago. So you can get all of this if you go to the website now. As you can see, it's Apache license, right? Which means you can do whatever. You see quite a few people forked this project, so they take it, they use it, they do whatever they want.
What they're going to do with it. Good for this. This is a beautiful thing. Thank you, Alon. And not only thank you for being on the show, thank you for showing this to us, but thank you and the Up9 team for making this available to everyone. This is a valuable tool arsenal. Look, one of the hottest things we're seeing right now is on the security side of things at Security Boulevard, API security, right? Everybody's talking about API security. Companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars for API security. The key to API security is knowing what APIs you have, being able to manage your APIs. At some point, I think when the market matures, API security will be a function of API management, right? API management means you're also securing your APIs, right? It'll be part of that. So a feature rather than a standalone. But this is fantastic, and it's open source. It's free to people out there. Go check it out. Alon, thank you again. Appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, and thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to meet again sometime soon.
Hopefully in person soon. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Definitely.
Alon Germansky, CEO, founder of Up9, here on TechStrong TV. Go check out Mizu. Here's the shot of it. You can get it on GitHub. You can search as he did, as Alon did here. You know, you saw it here first on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan speaks with Caroline Wong, who's the Chief Strategy Officer over at Cobalt. They're talking about her new book. She's got a book out. Yay. It's called the PtaaS book, the A to Z of Pen Test as a Service, going over everything organizations need to know about pen test as a service, especially in today's dynamic cybersecurity environment. It is a great conversation. It's a great book, too. So let's roll the conversation now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechStrong TV segment. I'm so happy to have my friend Caroline Wong back with us on TechStrong TV. It's been too long since I had a chance to speak with her here. Caroline, welcome to TechStrong TV. It's great to see you.
Thank you. I am thrilled, as always, to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, I think most of our audience knows, but let me just lay it out there. Caroline is a CSO, right, at Cobalt.io. And Cobalt.io is the world leader in pen test as a service.
That's right.
Is that fair?
That's right.
Did I get the branding and marketing spiel right? Or?
You got it right. You got it right. We are the PtaaS company, and I am our Chief Strategy Officer.
Absolutely. I said CSO. You know, I keep seeing you guys have hiring. You're always hiring more people. Every time I looked on LinkedIn, it seems we're hiring.
We're growing like mad. We're growing like mad. Last year, we had more than 50% ARR growth. And when I look at the number of organizations, if you go and Google PtaaS right now, Cobalt is not the only company that comes up. You will find more than 30 companies finding what they call what they do. They're calling it PtaaS, and we're thrilled, right? This is a revolution.
That's a good thing when you name the market you're in, right? The category. That's a good thing.
It's very exciting. It's super exciting. And I think for me, what's most exciting about it is I feel like we're making a real impact on the industry. So Alan, you and I, we have these views into DevOps and security. If I look at DevOps over the past 10 years, things have changed so dramatically. And we know how to do DevOps. We know how to do it well. We know that organizations who do DevOps have stronger performance. Now, if you look at security, security's not doing so well. In the 90s, a group of hackers went and testified to the United States Senate. They went back 20 years later and they said nothing's changed. We got a new OWASP top 10 last year, OWASP top 10 2021. If I put it right next to 2003,
three things are different.
It's the same thing. Yeah. And that says we are not making progress. Why are we not making progress? And then I look at something like, you know, if I look over at DevOps, they're really doing something right. You know, what can we do to be like DevOps? Because they've got this right. And if I look at on-prem versus cloud, on-prem is expensive. Cloud is less expensive. On-prem is not very flexible. Cloud is super flexible. On-prem is not very on-demand. Cloud is on-demand. On-prem doesn't have redundancy. Cloud is redundant, et cetera, et cetera. And so for us, I look at old school pen testing as on-prem and PtaaS pen test as a service as taking all of the advantages of cloud with it, including on demand. Start a manual pen test in 24 hours. And I'll tell you what else, Alan. When I worked for Cigital got acquired by Synopsys. But when I worked for Cigital between 2013 and 2016, I flew around the world. I was living that glamorous, high-flying lifestyle, and I did more than 36 BSIM assessments. Now, the thing about BSIM assessments, the folks who choose to do this, they're pretty good at software security because they're spending 5 figures to pay a company to evaluate them. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, in 2013, I found out that your average enterprise with 100 applications was only pen testing 10 of them. If they had 1,000 applications, they were only pen testing 100 because it was hard. It's hard to do pen testing. It's slow. It's expensive. There are all sorts of reasons why enterprises, some of the strongest enterprises at software security in the world, were only pen testing 10% of their application portfolio. Last year, Cobalt did a survey. Now that's up to 63%. From 10% to 63%, huge. That's better. That's better, but we still have a long ways to go.
You know, that's like someone once told me on TechStrong here. Someone once said, 75% of applications are now being scanned before they're deployed. And that's up also, same kind of thing. From
better than before. Yep.
Yeah. But you got to ask yourself, who are the other 25%? Right?
Yeah.
Who's not scanning stuff before they put it out? Same thing here. Who's not pen testing, or who's not pen testing all their apps? Are they just, are there? I mean, what's the logic? It's too expensive.
That's the logic. That's the logic. We don't have the budget for it, and we can't get it to happen fast enough.
But what's the budget when that app gets hacked?
That's right. Every single time, it's a roll of the dice. Yep. Because vulnerable software gets hacked. In 2021, ransomware was all the rage. And that's not changing anytime in 2022. No. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse because it works. Those cyber criminals are making tons of cash. They're going to keep doing it. And it's easy because software is vulnerable. But ransomware should not be so scary because we know how to prevent ransomware. The first ransomware attack happened in 1989. I was 6 years old. And in 2021, it's as though we don't know what to do, but we do know what to do. We're just not doing it. And part of the reason we're not doing it is it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been fun. But if we can cloudify, if we can, as a serviceify these things, then I think we have an opportunity to make real lasting change.
So, I think when I hear you talk, what you're saying, Caroline, so you can't blame the people who are not scanning all their applications because it's too expensive, right? One could look at this as an economics student and say, well, if there's a real need in the market, it behooves the providers, right, to come to do something to be more efficient, to allow the cost to stop being prohibitive to getting the job done. So in other words, there has to be an equilibrium between the cost of prevention and the cost of not prevention, the cost of an incident, right? And that equilibrium should continue to be lowered as we become more efficient in doing this kinds of things, right? It's like market, right? That's just the law of the market. Probably pen testing as a service is one of the biggest kind of market-driven reactions we've seen to bringing this down for the masses, to making it more available, right? Like you, I knew plenty of friends who did jump around the world doing, pen testing and a little social engineering and living that life, right? But when in today's world, when most apps are in the cloud anyway, why wouldn't you do it as a service remotely like this, right? It just, and it makes it affordable, or much more affordable than it was before.
Absolutely. You start way faster, right? A lot of organizations, it used to be so expensive and it used to take so much time because cost involves both money as well as time. And it used to take so long to get a pen test started that you could have, for simplicity's sake, we'll say your old school pen test costs $10 and you did it once a year because it also took you 2 months to plan. And now you can take that $10 and you can do 10 little ones throughout a year with a snap of your fingers. You can get started in 24 hours when you need to, because that's how software development goes. It's rapid, it's iterative. Our pen testing should be rapid and iterative as well.
All right. Let's hold that book back up again if we can, Caroline. No. Okay, so here it is. So first let me mention, this isn't your first book.
That is correct. My laptop's actually sitting on my desk copy of my first book, which is Security Metrics: A Beginner's Guide by McGraw-Hill, which came out a decade before the PtaaS book. And we're super excited about this. You can go to the Cobalt website and download it for free. It has all sorts of cute and funny cartoons. This is a book that we want folks to read, and we tried to make it really interesting and really engaging, and really just not boring. I don't think it's a boring topic. And so, we're really excited about it. If you want to learn how to scale your pen testing program, this book will tell you exactly how to do it.
Very cool. And so it's available for free download, but you're obviously holding a hard copy. For someone who, like me, I like hard copies. How could they get the hard copy?
You should send me a message and I will figure out a way to get you a hard copy.
Well, not just me. I mean, everyone
I know.
watching.
I don't think there's a real way. We're working on that. We're working on that. We're working on it. What I want to do is I want to get these so you can actually buy them off Amazon, right? How do we buy books off Amazon? So we're working on that. Okay, I would love that. The other thing that we've been thinking about, although it is not set in stone, is we're thinking about maybe doing a PtaaS conference in San Francisco in September.
Oh, that would be cool.
Details to be determined. Would be really cool.
TBD. It's actually TBA. Well, TBD, then TBA. But that would be very cool. That would be something we'd definitely be interested. We'll talk about it.
Cool.
So, Caroline, people read the book. We get the what Cobalt does with all this. At some point, rubber meets the road. And so if make believe I'm the CFO now, I'm not a security person, and I say, well, you want me to up my spend on pen testing from 63% of my apps to 99.9% of my apps. Where are the metrics that shows I get a return on my money there? Right?
Here's where it is.
Go.
It's in the fixes. Here's a weird thing about security frameworks and paradigms. You go to NIST 853, you go to whatever, 50, 100-page security guidance guidebook. And they always say, do a pen test. They always say, scan your apps. What they don't say is and then fix those vulnerabilities. Now, PtaaS is not only about defect discovery. It's not only about finding vulnerabilities. PtaaS is also about getting the right information in front of the right people so those vulnerabilities can be fixed. PtaaS happens in Slack. PtaaS happens in the platform. We have an API so that you can push stuff to Jira, you can push stuff to GitHub. We are getting the pen test data in the chunks that it needs to be in front of the developers. We're getting the pen testers and the security team and the engineers to talk together, because that's how fixes happen. And when someone completes the remediation of a pen test finding, we also include validation. So the pen tester who found that problem in the first place will go and check and say, yeah, this has been fixed correctly, and we'll update that in your report. That's how folks can measure, because the goal of pen testing is not just to find vulnerabilities. The goal of pen testing is to manage that risk, is to find the vulnerabilities and get them fixed, and maybe even prevent them. And people need the data. People need data to be able to see, am I even getting better? And the platform will give you data.
And that is so important. And you're right. For so long, pen testing, even vulnerability scanning in general, the emphasis was on what did I find, not what did I fix. And what they didn't realize is that the people who do the fixing are not often the security people. It's the help desk people. It's a developer for the apps. It's the DevOps or the SRE team. They're not necessarily security pros, but the burden of the fix falls on them. And in many ways, the fix is harder than the find.
It is way harder. It is getting other people to do stuff is hard. And the old way does not work. If I get a 50-page PDF in my email and I forward it to an engineering manager and I say, here are the results from our recent pen test, please work with your teams to get the findings remediated. That's not going to work. The person opens the email, they get stressed out, cortisol flows through their body, and that's not the way to get those things fixed. Now, in a PtaaS platform, if a finding is discovered, the engineering team finds out through Slack and then goes into Jira where a ticket has been submitted and can be worked on right away. They have a direct line of communication between the engineer and the pen tester who found the thing in the first place, so they can figure out how to get it addressed.
Absolutely. But
it's a process.
Right.
You have a real process now instead of just saying, oh my God, look at this telephone book on my desk of all these vulnerabilities or these, bugs or things I have to fix. And where do I start? Right. Where do I start and how do I do it? And who am I assigning what? And I'm just to heck with this, right?
Exactly. I'm not going to do this. Happens. This doesn't make any sense to me. I'm confused. I'm going to go work on the thing that makes sense to me and is straightforward and is kind of the right that fits into my work process. If we as security people want engineers to fix security vulnerabilities, we have to be curious about their work process and their tools and how do they work, and we have to work with them.
That's DevSecOps in a nutshell right there, my dear.
Yes.
Hey, for people who want to download the book, just go to cobalt.io.
Yep, cobalt.io. I'm sure there is. I'm just typing in cobalt.io, PtaaS.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, we will maybe hear more about PtaaS conference in September.
Yes, I will be filling you in as we figure out all the details.
Logistics.
Yep.
That's
cool. It's going to be right next to SaaStr. So that's why. I love San Francisco. It's an opportunity to go to San Francisco. And it's right. I can't remember which end of the SaaStr conference we're thinking about doing it. But San Francisco, September, first ever annual PtaaS conference.
If you're there, I'm there. And you will be at RSA conference.
Definitely. Most certainly.
In June. We'll see you there. And 3,000 people or more have taken your LinkedIn Learning class.
Well, so this is kind of fun. I have a bunch of different courses. I teach courses on the OWASP Top 10. I teach a very kind of general, like, when an organization has a compliance reason to assign cybersecurity training to all their employees, I teach a course that's like that. It's really fun. We hired additional actors. We tried to make it funny. I have a course on security metrics. The security metrics course has 3,000 learners.
Was the one.
But get this, cybersecurity at work has 90,000 learners.
Wow. You are the professor. Good for you, Carol. Well, you are actually our professor. That's a whole nother story. You're a Renaissance woman, man. Hey, thank you for coming on and visiting and telling us about it. Good luck with this. We will be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Caroline Wong, author, professor, Chief Strategy Officer, Cobalt.io. Go check them out. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. This one is part 2 of a 2-part conversation Mike Jones has with Mary Galloway, who is the CEO and founding board member for the Women's Society of Cyberjitsu, which is a nonprofit cybersecurity community dedicated to bringing more women and girls to cyber. She is a great person to talk to, I know from experience, and this is a great conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Why are you talking again?
Exactly. And a lot of certification companies are like that too. I remember I had Alyssa Miller on the show last year, and this was shortly after the debacle with EC Council.
Yeah.
And, one of my first certifications, I got a day off and I went and took a test for the CEH, and I was shocked at how easy it was.
Yeah.
And they've made a living off of that test.
Yes.
And also plagiarism. And
I have version 7.
Version 1.
Well, it didn't get better in version 7.
I took version 1. They asked me if I would help write version 2. And I was like, I don't know about that. I think I'll refrain from that. But yeah, certification.
I've heard they've gotten better.
What's that?
I've heard they've gotten better. Now they have like labs and stuff. I don't know. I don't want to ever take anybody's certification again. So
no.
I just keep stuff up to date and pay the fees, and because I'm not going back down that path.
That's one of my pet peeves about our industry is when we get newcomers wanting to get into cybersecurity and the entry-level jobs that are requiring these $5,000 certifications.
Yep.
It blows my mind. Like, I wish that they would stop with the certification, requirement, because all that tells me is that person was able to study for one test,
right,
and pass that one test. It tells me nothing else about that person. Right. But that is the base. DoD required CEH, required it.
Security Plus.
Yes, and I was just shocked. These people are depending on certs that have like zero value. When it comes to people learning security, if they have that money to take Security Plus or if they want to take the ethical hacking certification, it's cool. But I don't think companies should be like, okay, well, I know it's an entry level job and it's only going to pay you like $50,000 a year, but we need you to go out and get 3 certifications before we'll hire you. I think that's insane.
They should be willing to pay for that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the certification companies now, they are trying to, the courses are too expensive, no doubt, but a lot of them do have programs where people like vets and women and minorities can participate for free, which is cool because you're giving that opportunity to somebody that may not have the resources to do it.
Yeah.
I don't like, that's why I took Security Plus, because it was a DoD thing. And I was like, all right, well, if you're going to pay for education, fine, I'll take this. And that kind of spun me on the certification track.
I think when I first got in, SANS was really big back then. And I was so disenfranchised after I took their exams. So SANS was really respected back then, and they probably still are now. I just haven't taken any courses. But I challenged 3 of their certifications in one day and took it, passed it. And then they put me on an audit board because I thought I cheated because I passed all 3. And I was like,
because nobody's done that.
You should look at your content.
So it's open notes. Well, I don't know if it was open book back then, but so they're open book now.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can bring in all of the books. You can bring in any kind of materials you want. You can take notes. They recommend you do an index. Still expensive.
Yeah.
But they allow you to use your notes, which is cool because when you're working on the job, you're going to pull a book off the shelf if you don't know something to reference or Google it. Hello. So they've gotten better with that part. I'm a SANS advocate. I've got 6 of their certifications. Somebody else paid for it. So I let them pay for it. But they are one of those groups that are trying to make it more accessible, and they're offering scholarships to people because SANS training, we know everybody wants it and all of the companies want it.
Oh, for sure.
So it's like, all right, let's see how we can help drive more vets and more women and more minorities into the space. Let's offer some free stuff.
I do like their content. Their content is really in depth.
It's really good.
And you can dive off into all kinds of places with SANS. Like I have the GHTQ and the GCIH.
Okay.
And one other one. But the hacking techniques and the forensics I found combined into the same cert was really awesome.
Yes, that was cool. I like that too.
Yeah.
They've got really good instructors. Like a lot of these folks have been working in the industry forever. They know this stuff. They do this stuff on a regular basis. And so that's who you want building out content, because they're like, all right, these are the basic skills you need to know for this type of job. After this, you need to go and continue to research and do, more deep dives. But here's some basic stuff. Learn this. And people get jobs they'll finish the boot camp and then they got a job 2 weeks later. It's like, dang, how'd you do that? Because they're able to talk to those concepts. They're able to express that and explain it.
Yeah, I get people that are on interviews that I'm interviewing for like a SOC position or whatever. And, it really, they put a lot of pressure on themselves because I'll ask a question. If they don't understand it, they try to make something up. And I'm like, if you don't know it, it's okay. Because there's no way I would know everything about anything. On a daily basis, I'm researching, I'm looking stuff up, I'm learning new things. There's no way to know everything about cybersecurity because it's so complex. But I'd like to see less reliance on certifications for entry level. I get so tired of hearing the skills gap and the jobs that aren't filled because of skills gap. It drives me insane.
That drives me nuts. I'm like, have you guys talked to the people that you don't normally talk to? I guarantee you they've got the skills needed for this particular role. And maybe you don't understand what this role needs.
Or they just don't understand the role at all. Like I've been in companies where they'll, I'll say, hey, I have a position open for a level 1 analyst. And they'll write the job description. They'll do the first round of interviews. And when they get to me, I'm like, what, did you not know what we do? Like, this is not even the same realm. So yeah, I think we have a lot of room for growth in the industry when it comes to hiring the right people and being able to do it efficiently. I think we lose a lot of people in the hiring process, not just because the roles aren't well defined, but also because diversity, right? Like look at neurodiversity. There's a lot of people out there with autism or on the spectrum that don't handle interviews very well.
Right. But they're smart.
Super smart. And we're losing those people.
Exactly. Because it's stereotypes. We assume that they can't learn and that they don't know what they're talking about. Right. It's like, yeah, but they just learn differently. So how about we meet them where they're at and see how we can work this out? There's we have so much talent within Cyberjitsu. It's freaking crazy. And we'll see people, I can't get this job. It's like, but you have the skill set. What's really happening? And I've seen some companies starting to make a change and starting to do things a little bit differently, but they can't hire everybody.
Right.
They can't fill the 3 million jobs that are open. It takes a collective effort of everybody to say, okay, let's make this change. Let's give people the opportunity to come in and show us what they have. And if they don't have the skills, okay, fine, let's give them some training. And if they're still not receptive to it, then they got to go someplace else.
Right.
But let's give them those opportunities to at least show us that they can be successful.
And I'm really glad the last 10 years, there's been a real big push and kind of like a campaign for diversity. When I first came into the industry, it was driven by middle-aged males, white males, who didn't want to share information and held on to the keys of the kingdom and wouldn't let anybody know the magic that went on. And now we're starting to see a huge change with that. I think we're going in the right direction. I think we have a long way to go, but I think we're on the right path for sure. Yeah,
we're definitely moving where we're supposed to. It's just going to take more people to actively and be intentional about making that change, to say, all right, let's hire from within. let's move folks up that deserve to be moved up, that have the skills and the qualifications. Let's get them prepped and trained up to do that next level of whatever it is at the company. And because people aren't staying in companies anymore.
No.
Unless you really, really just like what you do, people aren't staying because there's more money next door. And so if you want to keep those people and get them to that level, you have to pour into them. You have to
invest.
You have to invest. Exactly.
I mean, if you really look at it, it's a monetary investment when you promote people.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of that goes on. People don't hire from within. One of the things that I like to focus on, the interns that I have, I will look at an intern before I will go outside the company for a level 1 analyst, because they're doing their time. Right. And, most of them are going to school and working, and it shows dedication and commitment. Yep. So that part's covered. And the knowledge of the platform that we use, they already have it. So why would you go outside?
Right. You don't have to train them up as much versus having to train somebody from scratch, which is fine. But look within. Yeah. But if they don't have if they don't have diverse candidates within, they probably need to bring some in first. Right. And then start to build that out.
So what is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to cybersecurity? And what is the one thing that keeps you going in cybersecurity?
Biggest pet peeve.
There's got to be one.
Oh, there's plenty. People not doing the research. So most of the basic stuff is out there on the internet. If you follow certain people, you'll get the answers to your questions. But people asking basic stuff, and it's like, did you go and research first before you came? Yeah. Or folks asking questions even at work, and they're like, I don't understand this, or I don't see this, and it's like, did you research first? Because all the information is there. It's like they want you to hold their hand and just spoon feed everything to you. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Because if you don't take the initiative now, you're never going to take the initiative later.
Now, do you think that's a generational thing, or do you think that's just people in general?
I think it's just people in general. This newer generation, I think, is a little bit more, I'm kind of like on the cusp of that generation, but we also see it in some of the, I guess, not boomers, but who's after the boomers? Whoever's after the boomers, those folks.
Gen Z. Gen X is
yeah.
Gen X
so we'll see that group too want to be spoon fed. It's like, but how did you get through your life? Come, if you're going to talk to me and you have a question, tell me what you did to try to solve this.
Right.
And then I can help you better, because now I know what not to tell you because you've already done it. Right. Don't just come and say help without having some sort of information behind it. Right. And then what was the other question?
What motivates you to keep going?
When I get emails that say, hey, you helped me do XYZ, like, oh, that conversation, or I watched one of your podcasts or your webinar and you said this one thing and, that kicked me in the rear end, and now I'm like doing all this, blah, blah, blah. Those kind of emails. That's what keeps me going.
I totally get that for sure. Going back to the pet peeve, I think it's really funny when someone will find me on Discord or find me on the internet and say, I really want to do what you do. How do you learn that? How did you learn that? And I'm like, bro, first of all, we didn't have the luxury of Google back when I started. So
really?
All you got to do is go to the internet. It's all there. Like, you could literally teach yourself everything I do by watching videos. You don't have to do what we did and have to bust through and figure stuff out on your own. It's there.
Exactly. It's there. And they could, hey, you see me talking and you see what I do, go read my stuff.
Yeah.
Like, go look at this, use your resources that you have.
And they have a ton of resources. Like I look back to when people like me and Chris Roberts, some of the old guard started back in the day, and we didn't have those luxuries. It was a very close community, and people held tight to information. If you went into IRC and said, "Hey, how do you hack this?" you would get flamed. Like they would kick you off the internet.
Not anymore. Now it's like, all right, here's the script. Here's how you do this. Go on the dark web and find it.
But I do think that causes an issue too, because we have, like you said, we have a lot of people coming into the industry that the first thing they want to be is pen testers. But they've learned how to pen test through bad means when they go to a certification company and they're handed Metasploit and shown just how to configure the exploit, but don't understand what the exploit does.
Right. Yeah.
And I see a lot of that. People call themselves pen testers that should not be touching systems.
If you don't know what this does and what the effect of it will be, you probably should sit back and learn about that first.
It reminds me of my first failure. So I was in Connecticut doing a pen test for a very large global company. And they had, I think it was an Avaya phone system. And I was doing a voice over IP pen test. Okay. So I get there and I wanted to run a vulnerability scan first. So I ran Nessus against the Avaya call server, and it physically melted the line cards.
I was going to say, how'd that work out for you?
It didn't. And so Avaya came out to the property and they're like, we've never seen this before. And come to find out, there was a vulnerability in their firmware on that card that caused that meltdown.
Oh,
that they had no idea about. But
wow.
I thought I was just doing my job, like
you were. But
it's one of the scary things when everybody looks up over their cubicle and nobody has phone service.
It's like, who did it? And you're like, wait a minute, let me duck down real quick and check.
I felt like Neo running from Agent Smith in the building.
That's how I felt when I was at my first job. When I didn't quite understand how changing the VLAN while the system is on without putting the new IP on the new VLAN will shut it all down. So I had to get on the phone and call a number of folks. Luckily, they didn't use their high side networks like that, so they didn't even see it. But it's like, hey, can you go unplug that switch for me because I'm testing?
Some collision here.
I'm like, crap. I shut their whole network down. I did that all the time. Then I was like, all right, cool. Let me do this, make sure it's correct before I just put this in there and blast everything away. But yeah, that was super funny. I was so embarrassed. I'm just like, I got to call somebody again. I don't want to tell my teammates because they're going to be like, this girl doesn't know what she's doing. I'm taking things down. It worked out. I learned my lesson.
So I'm going to assume that was one of your low points. So what is one of your high points for your career?
Ooh. To be honest, running a nonprofit. Well, okay, so this is going to be on camera, but running nonprofits is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But when you see other organizations following in your footsteps and doing similar things and trying to, change how they do stuff, it's really kind of rewarding. It kind of, it stings like, wait a minute. But then it's like, but you know what? Obviously, we're doing something right, and people see that. And so it's like flattery, I guess, is the best form of imitation is the best form of flattery or something.
Right.
But running a nonprofit, I think, has probably been one of the highlights.
Cool.
Because I get to meet so many people. I get to meet people like you, people at conferences, heads of organizations, and it's just kind of one of those cool things that I never really saw myself doing. I found Cyberjitsu because I failed the CISSP the first time.
You actually took the CISSP?
Yes, I do have it. I took it twice. Somebody recommended, I failed it by 4 points, and I was more upset that I had to pay the money again to take the test than that I failed. So I found a study group in Virginia, and that was in 2013. Yeah, so since the very beginning, I was just like, oh, this is some club. It's not going to do anything. And the fact that, we started to see these women and I met all of these awesome people through the process, I was like, oh, this is actually something important. There's important work being done here. And so.
Yeah, the CISSP, that was one of my very first managers in cybersecurity, Llewellyn Derry from NEC, tried to encourage me to get the CISSP. And I fought that tooth and nail. And I was just like, no, that's for managers. I will never be a manager. I'll always be a hacker. I don't want anything to do with management. And I didn't end up taking it. I grew into my role. And, I think the biggest part that turned me off about the CISSP was the fact that you have to continuously keep it up. And with so many things going on, I was like, there's no way I will fail at keeping that up. I will forget about it.
Yeah, that is definitely one thing. When CompTIA went to that method, I was like, come on, CompTIA, really?
I think they're all going that way.
And at some point you get to it's like, do I really need this certification anymore? Right. So I've got a ton of technical certifications, but I don't do anything now that my certifications would cover, except for the one that I got from Palo Alto, because it's specifically about our product.
Right.
All of the rest, nothing, So it's like, okay, at what point do you not go after certifications?
Right.
Because if you move into manager roles, those certifications don't matter.
No.
So it's like, okay, well, I've been paying on these things for, 10 years now at this point. It's like, do I really keep doing it, or do I just let them expire and say, hey, I had them.
Right.
You can see the knowledge that I have. I don't know.
I think that's where we're lucky, is we're at that point where we don't necessarily have to go out and beat down the doors getting certifications.
Right.
At this point, it'd be kind of irrelevant. But I mean, they do keep people moving and keep people interested. And I think it's important for the people who want to be in cybersecurity, but they get complacent or whatever. I, on the other hand, could do hacking and security research 24 hours a day. As a matter of fact, I do a lot of that all the time. So I don't really need that push to keep going and taking classes. But one thing I do want to finish this year is my degree. I have a ton of college credit, probably enough for a bachelor's, but it's all in science. So
that's okay.
I'm one of those picky learners where I don't want to do history and all that other stuff. I just want science and computer.
So, but you do know you will have to take the other stuff to finish, right?
I'm going to try social engineer my way out of that one.
You could totally CLEP them. I think CLEP exams are still a thing, or audit the course or something. I don't know. But you just suck it up and, take it for 8 weeks and be done with it.
8 weeks is a long time.
It really is, but it might be fun.
Yeah. So another thing too that you mentioned is that people don't stay at jobs for for a very long time. And I looked at my career and I looked at all the positions I've had, and it's really strange. There's like a cycle. It's like every year and a half, it's a new job. And I think a lot of that has to do with technology. Yeah. And the way things are moving in that space. So when I went commercial, one of the first certifications besides the ethical hacking certification I got was ArcSight. You mentioned ArcSight.
Yep. I got one of those too.
I got my ACSA, and it became like a moot point after a while because it went from ArcSight to things like Darktrace, to things like different SIMs that are out, and there's so many of them. I mean, I can't even count how many SIMs and how many platforms there are. But yeah, our industry moves very fast, and it's really hard to retain employees when it moves that fast if you're not moving with the industry.
Right.
And I think that's a key point. And the industry never keeps up with the pay either.
That's another problem.
Yeah.
And that's why people leave.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I got this experience. I can talk to it. I'm going to go over here and get $30,000 more.
Right.
And I can better support my family. I'm out. I don't need to stay. I stayed at the Venetian for 4 years. That's the longest I was ever at any job in my entire career.
But that environment, I could probably go to Caesars or Venetian and work there, and probably work there for the rest of my life.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
And they'll just be in those roles. And it's like, okay, because you have the opportunity I started in vulnerability management, helping build out that. And then I moved into architecture. So I was able to I guess, you know what? You change jobs after 2 years. I changed jobs after 2 years, but still at the same company. So, because I was starting to get bored and I wanted to do something different so that I could continue to, keep my skills up and refine my skills. And once people start getting bored, stagnant, needing more money, it's like, all right, I got to go someplace else.
Yeah. And I think what drove me to jump from place to place too is that if I see, an organization that I feel like I could help improve and I feel like I'm limited to my influence and it continues to fail, like I have to pack a bag.
Yep.
And that happens quite often because you get these startups. I worked in startups for a long time. And I think that is one of the challenges with startup companies is that, they don't allow that influence because they're more interested in funding and the board and, getting through those rounds of funding. So anybody listening that is thinking about getting into cybersecurity, take into consideration the experience that I had with startups and go for something solid.
I've heard that story too, because I wanted to. Last year, I was like, I'm going to go find a startup to work for because I want to make sure I get equity if they get bought or sold and blah, blah, blah. And people were like, yeah, so that's a needle in a haystack if that happens.
I've been at 2 startups that I left. And so Superior Viper Labs, I was there doing voice over IP security research. They got bought by Avaya. I was with ShoreTel out in Palo Alto's neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And they got bought by Mitel, and I missed both those payouts.
So you got to stick it out for a little longer.
Right. So people listening and getting into cybersecurity, don't put all your eggs into a startup company unless you're willing to stay longevity.
Yes. You got to stay for the long run because that's how you get paid out.
Exactly. And that's like playing the Vegas odds. It can or it can't pay out.
Exactly.
So we're close to the end of the hour, and it's been a blast having you on. I really enjoyed it. And while you're out in Vegas, since you live there, you should stop by Alyssa Knight's offices. They're building a studio. So
yeah, she was telling us that she was on a podcast last week or 2 weeks ago. And I was like, really? Yeah, because she said she was doing some crazy stuff. And I was like, well, I need to be a part of that. That team.
we're doing cyber short films. I have never written anything in my life, and she encouraged me to.
That's pretty cool.
Come write for her, and it was a blast. I have a good time. She's a great person.
Yes.
Before we go, any questions for me regarding a group or me or whatever?
You should speak at our conference.
I will absolutely do that. I will do it.
We'll put you on the schedule. What questions do I have? What's your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby right now, I have so many, but right now, my favorite hobby is 3D printing. And I actually have a print going on right now.
What are you printing? What are you making?
Don't laugh. I have a Maine Coon kitten who's sitting right next to me. And
like a real Maine Coon?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna be 25 pounds or so. But he likes to jump up on my Titan chair, which is very expensive.
Okay.
And I've had enough of it. So I'm printing cat deterrent braces to put on a chair that have little studs on it where he doesn't like to jump on it. And I'm printing a ton of them and putting them everywhere.
Okay. That's interesting. I want to see this when you're finished.
I have some already, but so here's the thing is I usually work at my desk, right? And if I leave the room and I have Slack open or maybe an email, he has a tendency to walk across my keyboard
and send messages.
Exactly.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I'm trying to keep from getting fired. So putting cat deterrent up there might be good.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll absolutely speak at your conference. Just send me the details.
Okay.
I'm totally free. So
okay, perfect.
We'll make it work. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And if you guys ever need help doing anything, just let me know.
I will definitely. Can we see the cat?
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna wake him up.
Yeah, me too. Almost 25 pounds.
He's just a kitten.
Aww.
His name is.
He's not gonna get big. That's so cute. I don't even like cats.
You know how old he is right now?
How old?
9 weeks.
Oh, geez. That's a big, yeah. Okay.
His paws are like a dog's paws.
Wow. Okay, my friend has Savannahs and boy and a girl, but I think they're like F2s, maybe F3s. Yeah. So they're not as big as what Savannahs can get, but they can jump the 8-foot wall. They'll stand up on the counter, like they'll put the paws up and see over the counter. And I'm just like, this is why I don't like cats, because they be all in stuff, scratching stuff up. I don't want them to be over the bed, like ready to claw my eyes out.
Yeah. So, don't watch Pet Cemetery.
The new one or the old one?
All of them.
Yeah. So awesome. Cool. But yeah, it was great talking to you as well.
Absolutely. I've looked forward to it. So you guys have a good rest of your weekend, and good luck on the 501 and all your endeavors. And I look forward to having you back on the show at some point. So
awesome. Will do. I'll bring my team.
Absolutely. I'll party.
Awesome.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we're back. Next up, we've got the Something Old segment. It is from the recent Predict 2022 virtual event. This one features John Willis from Red Hat. He talks about 4 lenses to better understand DevSecOps. Basically, letting folks know what they need to know when it comes to DevSecOps, and taking a lot of learnings from Deming in the process. So it is a great presentation with a lot of takeaways. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I think this is my first presentation of 2022. So even though it is late January, Happy New Year. My name is John Willis. I also go by the name Batchakaloop on pretty much everything, Twitter. This presentation is something I've been wanting to do for a while. It's called 4 Lenses to Better Understand DevSecOps, and we'll break that down. The first thing I want to do is just tell you what I'm going to tell you. So there's a little bit of introduction about myself, if you don't know who I am. The thing I've been obsessed with over the last 10 years easily is this consultant management person called Deming, Dr. Deming. So I want to tell you a little bit about him because it's his theories that I've been trying to apply to sort of complex systems, these 4 lenses. So we'll talk about that. And then I wanted to talk a little about complexity itself, right? Why would we need 4 lenses? And, why can't we just sort of do this versus that? I mean, obviously it sounds silly, but the point is a little bit of overview of the things that sort of get in the way, like Deming would call it the messiness of life. And then we'll go into the 4 lenses, which is based on basically a theory that it was created by Dr. Deming, 70 years of knowledge. And then we'll throw in a couple of case studies that are sort of DevSecOps related. And actually I've got some survey data in there too, so we can take a look at that. Just a little bit about myself. I've been doing this stuff we do for 40 plus years. I've done about 10 startups, 10 or 11 books, depending on what you count as a book or not. But probably most notable, the DevOps Handbook. In fact, there's a 2nd edition out now, and it's been updated. We have Nicole Forsgren now on, has added some fabulous new stories. We've added some new stories. And then I've done a few industry white papers you can see in there, the DevOps Automated Governance, Automated Cloud Governance. And then I've got 2 books coming out next year. One is called Investments Unlimited, which is going to be part of IT Revolution. It's sort of another follow-on in the Phoenix Project sort of story, but this time it's about an investment bank that fails an audit. And there's about 6 or 7 of us that are working on this. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then you'll see I've got a book about Dr. Deming coming out. You can see all the companies I've worked for. I sold a company to Dell. I sold a company to Docker. I was one of the earliest people in it, chef. Also today I work at Red Hat and I play guitar. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. I wouldn't call them shameless promotions; they're promotions. I've been, as part of the idea of really sitting down. So what happened was, I would travel. I would probably spend at least 50 hours a month on just travel because I travel a lot. And over the last 2 years, obviously with the pandemic, I haven't traveled hardly at all. And so I realized at the beginning of the pandemic, I really should take that time and take advantage of working on a book about Dr. Deming. And to that, I started a podcast. There's some just great interviews and stories out there. So you can find that anywhere, whatever your favorite sort of podcast service is. And then, like I said, I'm really excited. Hopefully in March, end of February, we'll have a finished book around 75,000 words. Prototype now is called Ed by Edward Deming, but it's built in the Moneyball. If you've read any Malcolm Gladwell, the sort of bomber mafia, so should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this. So let's talk about Dr. Deming. Probably one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Deming is, and there's some great quotes from Dr. Deming. You see them all over DevOps presentations and DevSecOps presentations. It's not necessary to change. Survival is not mandatory. There's a variance of this, but the point being, you need to change, right? Because survival is based on it. So Dr. Deming was born in 1900, died in 1993. Just want to do a quick, I probably have a 75,000 word book coming out pretty soon, but we're just going to try to cover it really quickly in one page. Basically, one of the interesting things, Deming was like this intelligent Forrest Gump character. Like he's always in these interesting places at different times, and like one of his summer intern jobs was at this Hawthorne Works, and Hawthorne Works was the place for electronics in the 1920s. I mean, it was they said that, if you wanted to go steel, you went to Erie. If you wanted to do automobiles, you went to Detroit. But if you wanted to do electronics, it was Hawthorne, Illinois, or Cicero. But a couple of things. That's where the Hawthorne experiments came from. A lot of this is what we know about sociology. It's where Dr. Field, we'll talk about later, created statistical process control. And probably the most important thing is it shaped Deming's view as a young man to see the worst and the best of working conditions, because it really had the worst and the best. He got a PhD in physics. He meets Walter Shewett when he goes to, Shewett was at Hawthorne Works. He clearly was aware of it. By all my research, it turns out he didn't really work directly with him until he got to the USDA, Department of Agriculture. And that's where he started honing in his theories about variation, statistical process control. We'll talk about that. 1940, he gets pulled over by request to work with the census. He introduces sampling. So Deming is a statistician. I mean, that's his core, what he loved. And so he basically the first time, and it's still used today. During the war effort, they realized his quality ideas are very important, so that he's actually asked by the War Department to teach a class for like the Rosie derivatives, like all the people that couldn't go or didn't go over to World War II to fight. A lot of people say that the quality of the war effort, and he wasn't the only one. There was a number like Duran. There was a couple of people that were teaching these classes, but the quality of those classes led a direct effect to winning the war. And in fact, there's a Halstam, I think, is Reckoning. He has a thing in the book about like when the Japanese engineers would capture an American plane. He said they were sickened by the gap in the quality between their planes. And he goes on and this, I spent a lot of time in my book, but he creates what they call he's involved in the economic miracle in Japan starting in 1950. I mean, people, when they say like Deming created the quality, and no, it was Japan who created the quality, but he had a lot of influence. And then he goes basically obscurity in the US. I mean, nobody knows really who he is. And then NBC does a documentary in 1980s called If Japan Can, Why Can't We? And so with this documentary, everybody in America starts understanding for the first time that Deming was involved in creating that miracle. And the CEO of Ford actually invites him in. And actually the Ford Taurus is the first Ford project that was completely Deming. Actually, Peter Senge worked on it as well. And that was the beginning of the TQM unit. So there's a lot of stuff there, a lot more in the longer version. But certainly Dr. Deming had a lot of influence on a lot of things that we do today. he wrote 3 books, basically wrote a lot of papers, but his first real book is Statistical Adjustment of Data, which is really about his thoughts about variation. That's in 1964. Probably the 2 most important books is Out of Crisis in 1982. And this is where he defines his 14 points. So I'm not going to cover that here because we're just trying to keep this, in a shorter sort of presentation. But I would encourage you to Google the 14 points and then notice how DevOps and DevSecOps they are. But the thing we're going to focus mostly in this presentation is his last book. I mean, his last book was published the year he died. And this is where he put his 70 years of knowledge in something he called System of Profound Knowledge. And so that really is the lenses, the 4 lenses that we're going to talk about here in this presentation. So when we talk about complexity, the sort of human way to think about a problem is X. You do X and it creates an outcome of Y. They call Y sort of dependent variable. So when we think about upgrading an operating system or upgrading a system or patching, right? That's the computer on the top. Or we're talking about dealing with an incident, an outage, or a cyber attack, a breach. Or when we're talking about just new features, new functions, right? There's this sort of notion of that things are really simple. If I do X, I get Y. As Deming would describe what we call the messiness life, it's usually not just X causes Y. There's usually multiple variables involved. And, and in the case of multiple variables, you would have, one thing, then something else. And a lot of times you'll see when we look at sort of problems, we know it's like something happens that sort of creates minor disruption. Then something else happens that creates a little bit more. And by the time the third thing happens, it becomes a cascading effect, right? One of the things I use in my book is the famous, what they call the Miracle on the Hudson, the U.S. Air Flight 1549 with Sully's-Burger. So it was the bird strike story, right? I think it's a great way. In fact, I use it. I've written a blog article and I use it in the book about how to understand, systems thinking really in sort of complex systems related systems thinking. So if you look at, this case, what we could say is in the Sully case, X1 was the bird strike. John Allsbar essentially says that bird strike is the hello world of aviation failures. So I thought that was interesting. X2 could be when he lost both engines. So we got to imagine that like the birds hit both engines. There's geese. There are these like ridiculously large geese he hits coming out of LaGuardia at 3,000 feet, right? And then like both engines go out, right? So that's sort of the next sort of variable of things gotten worse. And then what's even crazier is his co-pilot, pulls out what they call the QRH, which is a quick reference handbook. And first off, there were no procedures for this. But secondly, that US Air, in a cost-cutting measure, took the tabs off of to save money, took the tabs off of the handbook, right, to save money, which, just out and out ridiculous, right? So, but then the other thing that happens is when you try to understand complexity, is not just multiple variables that are causing this complexity. There's time dependencies. So, for example, the first couple of things might have happened. We see this again. Something in IT might sort of create a minor disruption on Wednesday afternoon. By Wednesday evening, it's now turned into a cascading failure because other things have happened. In this case, sort of an X4 and X5. If we use the Sully story, his X4 and X5s, these sort of other variables that came into the complex system, which was he was having to, he's dealing with his co-pilot, trying to find the procedures. He's trying to make sure that everybody stays alive. And he's on the phone with the tower. And they're trying to tell him, hey, I think you can get back to LaGuardia. Let us get a runway for you. If not, go to Teterboro, which was in New Jersey. So there was this whole sort of dependent, time-sensitive stuff that added into the complexity of where he was ultimately going to land. If you don't know the story, they landed in the Hudson River. And then sort of X5 could be that. So if you think when he hit the birds hit the end, knocked out the 2 engines, they were at 3,000 feet. In less than 2 minutes, they're at 1,000 feet, right? So the bottom line is there is this critical dependency of descending plane, right? And like the whole incident was less than 5 minutes, right? So again, just trying to give you understanding complexity and to the point of why we need to use, much more sophisticated or a better way to think about how to decouple this complexity other than just, oh, if I do this, that will happen. X causes Y. And there's a gentleman or a scientist called Herbert Simon. He is famous for a number of things, but one of the things he called is bounded rationality. So when we're looking at sort of post hoc or postmortem, or even trying to understand, what happened, we have to realize that this notion of bounded reality is that the people are making decisions in the real world. They're trying to avoid, in these cases of safety critical, avoid catastrophic consequences. They're using heuristics. So Sully was an expert. Like, he studied aviation failures. He had a blog site on. In fact, for those of you who know Sidney Dekker, on the beginning of that trip, he had Sidney Dekker's Drift into Failure book in his backpack, right? And they make decisions they call satisfying. So the idea is like, and then so we have to take that they don't have, when people are making these decisions, they don't have unlimited resource. They can't, so they couldn't Google something, right? Like, you have this time sensitive boundary. And so I wanted to talk about the Dr. Deming's, what we call the 4 lenses of how, so we talked about complexity, just a glimpse into, sort of system thinking and complex systems. I mean, very short glimpse. And now this is the sort of methodology based on sort of Deming's work that we might be able to use. So one of the interesting things about Dr. Deming that I've learned, over certainly more in the last couple of years is he chose his words really, his choice of words was very important to him. And he was very, and he didn't suffer fools. So when he chose a word that he felt that, and one of the examples is he calls these lenses the system of profound knowledge. And in fact, when he was interviewed once about the miracle in Japan, they were asking, like, who caused this, who did that? And he didn't say, well, I'm the one that solved Japan's problem. But a lot of people saw it that way because he said there was only one person in Japan with profound knowledge. And here's the thing. When Deming was talking about profound knowledge, he wasn't using it as an adjective. He was using it as a noun. Like, he wasn't saying, I'm the only one that could have solved this problem. But he's saying there was a set of knowledge that had to be used to be able to create those conditions. It's the same conditions he basically created at Stanford University. It's the same conditions he did at the BLS on the changing the way a census was done, right? And then we'll see later it's the same that helped Ford actually overtake GM for I don't know how long, but GM had basically taken over Ford in the early 30s. And then after Deming's work on the Ford Taurus, Ford was back ahead of GM again. So in his world, it was this noun of profound knowledge. And so his system of profound knowledge is made on these 4 lenses. And the way I like to think about these 4 lenses is very much the way a photographer tries to. So I use this sort of analogy of the way a photographer tries to create the truth or the reality of a picture, right? When a great photographer takes a picture, and take, for example, the iconic V-Day, of the sailor kissing the woman, right? That's the perfect photo. And in fact, what makes it perfect, the assumption I would have is that photographer understood what ISO, what's the sensitivity of light, the aperture, the depth, and the shutter speed, which would have been the motion, right? Because he's sort of grabbing her, but there's no blurriness. There's the depth and the sensitive light is perfect, right? Well, that's what Deming is basically trying to provide us in this thing he calls system of profound knowledge. And what he describes is the 4 lenses are based on really these 4 areas. And again, trying to just jam this into a couple of minutes is probably, I just want to get you the general idea. I have a blog site. I'm always willing to talk more about this stuff if you're interested. But the 4 lenses, first is appreciation for system. That's systems thinking. Looking at the whole and not the component parts, right? And making sure that you understand a system, right? And, and Deming's, another famous quote of Deming is that, 94% of the problems are caused by the system, only 6% are caused by people, right? Or something like that, right? And the truth of the matter is, I think if he lived today, he would probably call it more like 99%. The most problems are system problems. And then the second is the variation I talked about, sort of knowledge of variation, to understand when when a certain variant or something should be dealt with. In fact, one of my favorite quotes is misinterpreting variation is the root of all evil. So like if you don't understand that, like sort of, and I'll show some cyber examples a little later, but like the understanding there, and there were two types of variation, what he called common cause and special cause. And we'll talk a little more of that. And then theory of knowledge was another lens that needed to sort of overlay this complex systems. And that is basically how do we know what we know, or epistemology. Schuett created originally something called the Schuett cycle. Deming kind of redefined it as the Deming wheel. It ultimately today we know it as plan, do, study, act. Some people still refer to it as plan, do, check, act, but it really is scientific method. It's like we base things on the evidence and the hypothesis and the proof. And here's the thing I think is the most interesting about SLPK. I think all those first three lenses are very important, very sort of technically, methodologically, technical. But adding psychology onto the lens was really sort of a brilliant. And I go back to all the things that Deming learned from Hawthorne, to even working in Japan. He saw the intrinsic nature of the worker in Japan. And I think by the time he's 93, well, he starts his sort of thesis of SLPK probably, in his late 80s, which really is his knowledge of 70 years. He describes this idea of that you have to put a lens that understands motivation, intrinsic motivated people. You understand, like he called joy of work. You need to understand cognitive biases. In fact, one of my favorite stories, and I interviewed this woman, Doris Quinn. She spent the last 2 years of Deming's life traveling with him, and she was a hospital, sort of an instructor, like a lead quality expert in HCA, one of the biggest hospitals. And Deming invited her to travel with him. And I got a great sort of interview and podcast with this. And one of the things that Deming found her interesting is she went to one of his classes before she knew him. And she told this story of how when she went to New Guinea, when she got there, there was sort of a lot of sort of conflict between the witch doctors or the medicine people who would say that you didn't need any drugs for malaria, you just needed these sort of certain tribal rituals or witchcraft or whatever. And they would argue like, you have to use medicine, you got to have antibiotics. And Doris Quinn came in and said, well, what we need to do is like, that's their sort of bias and their sort of the way they think. So to use like a theory of psychology, it would be say, that try my medicine in conjunction with the spirits. And again, Deming caught that, and he realized that was a really good example of the theory of psychology. One of my mentors in DevSecOps is a woman called Shannon Leitz. It's just new to it. She's actually over at Adobe now. If you get a chance to see any of her DevOps Enterprise Summit presentations about adversary analysis, again, this is a great example of not just using sort of cookie cutter, like if we just DevSecOps it, if we use a DevSecOps reference architecture that company X does, we'll solve all problems. If we just can scan all the libraries, then this will work. Shannon takes a more, sort of looks at cyber from again, a theory of knowledge or epistemological approach, right? Instead of just scanning libraries and doing the traditional things, that's what she does, do that. But she also looks at it by the adversaries and their motivations. This is something Deming would love, Shannon Leitz, right? And so instead of just saying, well, there's just adversaries and we got to protect our libraries and our perimeters, she does analysis on the adversaries. What are their motivations? And she does a great presentation of sort of breaking out like the difference between what she calls scanners, researchers, paid noise, and the sort of the worst of all, the advanced adversaries. These are the ones that really do the nasty kill chains and all, right? As opposed to people who are just, like researchers could be considered adversaries, but they're sort of white hat, like they're trying to find things before the bad people do. So, one of the things that she has is she does metrics on what she calls the adversary analysis or adversary retaining rate. So these are classic areas of variation and theory of knowledge, right? In the case of variation, she's be able to track how long they come, how quick, what are the anomalies, what are the special cause variation, and then the other really cool thing she does is she tracks to sort of theory of knowledge, a PtaaS approach, plan, do, study, act, where she tracks if she makes an experiment on something to change where she believes the adversaries will stay less or return less, she'll actually make the change, track it, and understand, to plan it, do it, study, and check did it really change anything, right? So again, this is really in line with a lot of the tenets of system of profound knowledge. And I wanted to cover a couple of DevOps surveys. So there's a number of reports out there. Probably my sort of go-to, the Sonatype, the community survey, and the state of supply chain. They were a must. The state of software supply chain is a must read. I do try to catch the Verizon data breach, and the CrowdStrike global threat is something I've been really tracking lately. GitLab and Sneak definitely have some good data as well. But again, the state of the software supply chain is probably my favorite, and the community survey is getting pretty good. So again, I wanted to look at some of the survey data in terms of the system of profound knowledge. One of the things that we found in a recent survey is that that this idea of immature and mature DevSecOps practices, right? And so like the gap between the immature and the mature, so the left-hand side, seem to be smaller when we're talking about like WAFs and IDSs and SAST and data loss prevention. But the gap got much wider when we talked about container security or DAST or software composition analysis or AST. And so the point being that this is really ripe for trying to understand appreciation of a system, systems thinking. Like, why are we not doing these things? Why do we think we're okay just doing this? And again, you could also think about it in terms of data or variation points as well. So very similar on a report that basically says that, again, a recent report that says that basically, if you look at this, like it says 55% deploy at least once a week, but actually 18% deploy daily and only 7% deploy on demand, right? And, from my perspective, that goes back to, again, epistemology, understanding, probably psychology. Like, why are these companies are not moving faster into sort of on demand or at least daily, right? 8%, like 80% of them seem to have this notion. And what I find is, there's sort of like, I can't do this because of PSI DSS, which is nonsense. I can't do, I have to have air gaps. There are certain applications that can never be DevOps, right? And those, again, fall, into those sort of biases, the theory of psychology. It doesn't follow sort of the PtaaS, the epistemological approach to the decisions you make. And then variation here again is, I think people over-rotate on vulnerabilities in terms of scanning, but they don't really look at the sort of the variation in the data. Again, great opportunity. I would say this, not all vulnerabilities are equal to all applications, right? So it isn't just like, this is a 0-day drop everything, right? Like, you really have to figure out how it affects. In fact, somebody said to me the other day that their applications were so old that they didn't have to patch. There wasn't a time pressure to patch Log4j. I was like, again, that was kind of funny. So last but not least, the case studies. So there's, I've used this many times, but I really wanted to, in the context of this presentation, put it in this four lenses: system of profound knowledge, the systems, the variation, the theory of knowledge, and psychology. So if you know what happened at Equifax, it was Struts 2, Jakarta breach. Basically, it happened to be on a system that basically, if you did this curl command and you put in a command, pound command is equal, and you got lucky as an adversary, it was authorized, you basically could start any kill chain you wanted, all right? And the sort of the theory is that's how it started. And here's the thing, right? The CEO said, hey, we got it here. We figured it out. It's a single person who failed to deploy a patch, right? Deming would have just puked all over this, right? He hated, he was the ultimate humanist, right? Like, blaming people was something he hated, right? All the work we do in DevOps and blameless postmortems, Deming would have been all in on this, right? It was just a simple way to say this set of all these complex things. It was really an X causes Y, right? If you go back to the early complex systems or complexity. But the truth of the matter is there was a congressional oversight report, and there was just like, incredible stuff in there just that totally negated that stupid, sort of CEO thing. By the way, that CEO got fired. Here in the report, it said the CISO never told the CIO about the breach. And when she was asked, she said she didn't think about it. Well, it turns out she reported to the chief legal officer, not the CIO, right? So there was this, organizational structure that wasn't sort of designed around systems thinking. It was siloed. Right into the report, there was a cognitive bias that when the CISO was asked, didn't you think it was odd to work for a chief legal officer and not the CIO? She said, I figured they knew what they were doing. That's class. That's like, classic, that's the way it's been done around here forever, right? Again, things like theory of psychology will decouple that. Things like the theory of knowledge will force you to sort of break out your hypothesis of your decisions. And then, variation, another thing that was in the report, like all the IDS systems, the certs for those IDS systems had been expired for 18 months prior to the breach. So here again, PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act, or understanding variation and causes of variation would have been very important. Again, counterfactuals, I'm not saying I'm a genius. There is the bounded reality problem, but again, I'm using these as thought exercises. And then the Capital One is very similar. The Capital One, you have the Capital One breach that happened a couple of years ago. One of the first responses from the executives or the industry was the attack was carried out by a former Amazon employee who had these inside knowledge. It's nonsense. Because again, that's another one of those X causes Y. And the problem with that kind of thinking is it allows the thing to happen over and over and over again. You get to this sort of, this absolute root cause thinking. Okay, we know what happened. It did this. In fact, Toyota would never let that happen. They had this. You go to Gemba. Couldn't just, if something broke, you couldn't just call somebody and say what happened. They said, oh well, we think it's this. Okay, good. Call me if it doesn't work later. No, they went down. The floor manager would go see it. And so that in this scenario, again, if you knew what happened based on some of the data and the reporting was that, like I said, they were rotating IDSs. So they were doing these upgrades. So there was probably a window of some IDSs that were not, because Capital One is a really high hygiene cloud infrastructure DevOps place, right? So these like really, and just like Sully was a great pilot. So they were rotating the IDSs, and then there was a team of developers that needed an exception to get a web server up pretty fast. So they got this exception. The thought processes was they found that they did it where there was a window where there might not have been an IDS pointing. They didn't have a process to do this out of band, so they just kind of picked their own proxy, and they took all the defaults and they cut and paste some of the configuration definitions for the cloud, right? So they probably they cut and paste maybe authorized VPC, and now they had this was the killer, which was they left bypass on. So it was a default for this particular proxy, and so anybody, not some expert, super knowledge person, could have hit a curl and got lucky at capitalone.com : and then if they knew there was this thing called a metadata server, which is the core of how you sort of communicate with Amazon instances, it would have just told, and it did tell this hacker basically everything they needed to know to start the kill chain, right? So the point being, and in the end, this was called the server-side request forgery, right? Which is one of the bigger problems right now is identity. But again, we can tie that to all the four lenses. We can tie it to systems thinking. We can tie it to variation, understanding the types of causes of variation. We can tie it to epistemology, PDSA. We can tie it to psychology. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm John Willis, botchgloop at Gmail. I'm botchgloop on Twitter. And if you were interested in any of this, I would encourage you to check out my profound-demi.com, which both has both my blog articles and all access to all my podcasts. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at some of the issues engineering teams are facing during development. According to the 2021 Code Time Report from Software, roadblocks and bottlenecks continue to stymie engineering teams, with only about 10% of developers spending more than 2 hours a day per coding, including on weekends, and about 40% of developers spending more than 1 hour per day coding. The median code time per developer is 52 minutes per day, or 4 hours and 21 minutes of code time per week. The conclusion of the report was most companies ineffectively deploy their development and DevOps teams, bogging down engineers with distractions, disruptions, and meetings, as well as system inefficiencies such as slow reviews, slow builds, and bad tools. Improving visibility across the entire development lifecycle can be a huge help, enabling DevOps teams to focus on the biggest constraints and have a more meaningful impact on their team's productivity. This article looks at the different ways in which teams are still being held back and ways in which organizations can better equip their DevOps teams to work as quickly and efficiently as possible. And we have a very good argument in favor of API standardization. Lately, new environmental, social, and governance initiatives have come front and center as companies seek to contextualize and limit their business's impact on the environment. This is especially true for the built world, where monitoring energy efficiencies is becoming more commonplace and even required by law. However, there's a lot of legacy technology in use within most large commercial and residential buildings, and pulling data from these systems is notoriously difficult. This is an area where REST APIs are set to accelerate by uniting legacy integration software and disparate hardware with a standard layer. API-driven standards for built environments could open transparency into hardware component behaviors and the interrelationships between systems within a building. This article looks at the history of building protocols and standards that aim to unite legacy and modern physical infrastructure. It also considers the competitive advantage APIs bring to the built world and how increasing data accessibility could assist operations. In news, Tricentis extended its suite of cloud-based testing tools to make it easier to develop cloud-native and mobile applications and migrate existing applications to the cloud. New capabilities added to the portfolio include integrations for cloud-based planning tools and a wider range of testing capabilities for mobile applications. DevOps teams can now deploy Tricentis Q-Test platform for managing the testing process within a Kubernetes cluster. Tricentis also made it easier to configure and update its Tosca suite of application testing tools and added more capabilities for testing SAP applications running in the cloud that previously were deployed in an on-premises IT environment. The goal is to make it easier for DevOps teams to integrate continuous testing for various types of applications within their DevOps workflows. DevOps teams have the option of invoking the Tricentis suite of testing tools via software as a service platform or deploying them on a cloud platform themselves using templates provided by Tricentis. All right, over on Security Boulevard, our legal guru, Mark Rash, is back with an interesting article about insurance and identity theft. He takes a look at a case involving a gold coin dealer, Dylan Gage, which sold more than $1 million in gold coins to someone who had stolen the identity of an Alabama orthopedic surgeon and had the shipment sent to a UPS facility where he collected the package and absconded with the coins. Dylan Gage was out both the $1.2 million in coins and the payment for those coins. Fortunately, the company had insurance that covered losses to covered property, including the shipping coverage for the gold coins. The loss of the property was literally due to it being stolen from the UPS facility, which was due to a fraudulent email to UPS telling them not to deliver it to the doctor's home and instead letting the fraudster pick up the package at the facility. But insurance companies, being what they are, saw it differently. A legal case ensued, and long story short, a federal appeals court ruled that Dylan Gage was not entitled to coverage. Rash serves the story up as a warning. Companies that think they have coverage for things like computer crime, data theft, business email compromise, identity fraud, false impersonation, and other criminal activities and thefts may find that their insurance coverage is not as extensive as they think, and that the exclusions are broader than they think. They are also finding that to get coverage, they may have to go to court and sue their carrier. And even then, there's no guarantee of success. Finally, Palo Alto Networks has launched a cybersecurity platform that was developed from the ground up to take advantages of advances in artificial intelligence. Cortex XSIAM, or Extended Security Intelligence and Automation Management, uses algorithms to automate as many tasks as possible. Any remaining tasks are then handled by cybersecurity professionals. XSIAM platforms are the next wave of security technology and will supersede legacy security event information management platforms, which use algorithms to add incremental IT capabilities to an existing platform. The new approach doesn't eliminate the need for cybersecurity professionals. Rather, it provides a way to take better advantage of algorithms' capabilities so that organizations can thwart threats in minutes rather than hours or even days. Cortex XSIAM goes beyond just collecting logs and alerts to enable machine learning algorithms to drive autonomous response actions such as cross-correlation of alerts and data, detection of highly sophisticated and emerging threats, and automated remediation based on threat intelligence and attack surface data. That approach not only ingests more granular data, but Palo Alto Networks also claims Cortex XIAM platforms can ingest, normalize, and integrate data at nearly half the list cost of legacy SIEM platforms. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the headlines today. Please check back with me on Thursday when I'll have a new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Tony Mendoza, who is the Senior Director of IT over at SpectraLogic. Tony, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I'm interested in hearing, you guys recently actually went through a ransomware attack and want to hear about your experiences with that, and also why you guys decided to actually take the information public. But first, I wonder if you can let the audience know about SpectraLogic in case there are some folks out there who don't know what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So SpectraLogic is a company that's been around for about 45 years. I've been at the company for 20 years and been through the entire IT organization and now part of the business leadership team here. SpectraLogic, we like to call ourselves experts in storage. We manufacture hardware storage products such as tape, automation, and disk. We also have recently become involved in storage software.
Okay, great. So definitely a company that has been around the block a couple times, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of trends happening in the IT space in general. Tell me about your ransomware attack. What happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is I think back to 2020 when we were early part of 2020 when we were being infected with COVID. Mm-hmm. We had to start thinking about what we were going to do with our workforce and how to keep our workforce safe. And we decided to move our traditionally on-premise workforce to a remote workforce, and this is pre-hybrid, so this is purely remote to keep people safe. And we did it very quickly. And so we went from like I said, traditionally on-premise workforce IT was moving everyone remote and building the tools that they could use to connect. And security was part of that discussion, but this is also the time where ransomware was taking off because it was an opportunity for them to start attacking people. So we got attacked. And this is, like I said, right in the middle of us moving remote. So our IT group still was on site. And our remote workforce got attacked. We're here on site and we saw the systems failing and they failed very quickly.
Wow. So I imagine that was a bit of a shocker for you guys, especially since we had heard about ransomware happening here and there, but it really was not until, to your point, everybody got sent home, everybody was working remotely, that cyber criminals really took advantage of things. So how did you guys, how did you guys know that you were up against a ransomware attack, and how did you guys get through it?
Yeah, it's interesting. We started seeing minor system failures, and we started to investigate them. We started getting calls from end users saying that they're seeing some weird anomalies, and we kind of took our time and thought, okay, there's something going on here with our infrastructure, or there's a failure here. Until we saw a directory where there would be thousands of files, there was now one file with a note. And it was a very simple text note that said, your files have been encrypted. Here's the ransom. You have 5 days to pay it. And as soon as we saw the first one, we started looking at other systems and found out that it was propagating itself very quickly. Huh. And literally, this is no joke, we ran to the data center and started pulling plugs.
Wow. So how much of your company was actually affected by it? Were you guys shut down for a while to get through it, or how did you? What was your response?
Yeah, so jumping ahead to the end, after we did our analysis of it, we figured that about 40% of our systems were infected by this. The problem was the majority of those were our tier 1 systems that we need for business to function. So our business was shut down for about 5 to 7 days before we got people back up and working. Not our entire infrastructure recovered, but taking a step back, we shut down the entire infrastructure and started looking at our disaster recovery plan and our co-op plan, and started contacting people saying, we're down and we don't know what the extent of the damage is. We don't know when we'll be back up. So the first few days were really us, my team working 24 hours a day, trying to literally stop it and assess it.
Wow. I can't imagine having to go through that on top of everything else that was, going on in the world. And, kudos to you guys for being able to get up as quickly as you did. I've heard stories of companies that are down for weeks and even months trying to reconstruct their files and get back online.
Yeah, and let me be honest with you. We took about 5 days before we got to a point where we were comfortable with our decision to recover our systems. And honestly, it was 30 days of getting our systems back up and running. Obviously a priority was to get our workforce working again. And so we slowly got them working again, but it was about 30 days to get our infrastructure back up to where we thought it was performing at about 80%. And it took probably 6 months to finish cleaning up the mess.
So we do hear about companies undergoing a ransomware attack, but not a lot of them are very public about the fact that they've done it. And it's really only kind of, they're being forced into disclosing the fact that their files were compromised and their systems were compromised. You guys you're being very open and honest about it. So why did you guys decide to take this route and just let folks know that, hey, we were attacked, we lost files, we had to, we had to go through everything to get back up online? Why are you guys being so open and transparent about it?
You said something that a lot of companies have to go public because they're forced to go public. I'm in IT and I don't like to go public about, what we consider a breach or a failure. But one thing that happened with us in this attack is when we got to that day 5, which is their deadline to pay this $3.6 million ransom, which for a company like ours is a substantial amount of money. We got to this point where we saw that our backups on tape were immutable; they were untouched, and we had disk snapshots that we call virtual air gaps that were also untouched. And we made a decision at that point that, hey, look, we're protected here. We better be. We're in the storage industry. We call ourselves experts, but we had a formula, and the formula worked. And we also realized that we had no data that left our company. So we had two things going for us. We had a formula for recovery, and we were confident that no data left our company. So we were protected there. And we sat down with leadership and decided, hey, we should share this formula with people. It's not about paying the ransom. And sometimes when you pay that ransom, you're not going to get the recovery keys from the threat actors. Right. And if you do, it's going to take you months to get your data back to a usable point, if you can even recover it. And so we thought, this is something that we ought to share and help people protect themselves and at least give everyone a fighting chance with it. And another thing it did is with this formula, we sat down with our product teams and said, hey, we can develop something here that helps people out that markets this formula to people. And so that's where our attack hardened products came out of the picture is we said, look, I don't want to say we figured it out, and I don't want to say we're 100%, but we have something that could give people ease their minds a bit about it.
That's really interesting. You guys turned something as could be potentially devastating as a ransomware attack, actually turned it into a business opportunity, which kudos to you guys. That's pretty awesome that you guys did that. That worked out well for us. And it's funny, I speak about it quite a bit. And I know, at to a certain extent, I'm putting a target on Spectra's back by talking about these things, but I'm also a believer that it's going to happen again. And you can't block 100% of it. And you just have to have at least the tools to arm yourself with decision-making power of, I can at least recover my data. It's painful, but you can do it. Well, a lot of things in life are painful, unfortunately. Yeah. So what is this, the plan that you guys are selling, I guess, for lack of a better word? Is it, are you guys advocating for more on-premises type data backup and protection? Or are you looking at more of a cloud-based solution, or is it some sort of hybrid of the two? Or what in simple terms, what are you guys advocating for?
It's really hybrid. What we realize is tape is still the silver bullet, right? We keep tapes off-site. Those are untouchable. Those are pure air gap systems that now come into play with this. They used to be solely for disaster recovery, what we consider disaster recovery, which is a physical disaster. We realize that they work well in this kind of the cyber attack and this business continuity recovery. So that's one of those things. If you have that silver bullet, you can start now making decisions on how you can protect your data in other ways that's maybe quicker to recover or more near line to your production network. So what we're advocating is still obviously that air gap. You can't get away from that. But we have this what we call virtual air gap with our attack hardened products that you can take snapshots throughout the day, and we do it every 15 minutes now. And you can protect them. You can snapshot them. You can replicate them, and you can keep them protected. And that goes for your cloud data too. And I hate to really blanket all cloud data, but it's up to you to protect it. It's not up to your providers to protect that data. So or to back it up. So we built that into our systems that you can now get snapshots of your cloud data also.
Oh, that's very, very cool. I like the idea of a hybrid solution because, it's always good to hedge your bets whenever you can. And, even if some of it can't be recovered, at least you've got, part of it that, you're not starting from ground zero, basically.
Yeah. And it really, one of the things we really advocated is to limit your attack surface area, right? Your blast radius. So if you have multiple systems and you have multiple snapshots and you have things protected, you have options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And considering the amount of stuff that has gone up into the cloud, especially since the onset of the pandemic, it just makes sense. Tony, what a great story. Thank you so much for walking me through it. And I'm so glad to hear that you guys recovered nicely and have actually made it into a business opportunity. I'm amazed at that. I think it's a great story. And I'm glad you shared it with us. I do appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up. So stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. I always tell you, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Well, here are 3 just to prove my point. So hopefully you will be able to mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called the 2022 API Security Checklist. This one is happening Wednesday, March 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by WallArm. Guarding against common API security issues is only the beginning of your organization's security responsibilities. Your product security and DevSecOps teams, not to mention your engineering teams, must be able to quickly detect and respond to security incidents that will affect your business and your customers. This webinar will walk through the 2022 API Security Checklist, which outlines some of the most common API security issues, their implications, and mitigation strategies. You'll learn how to address the most common API security issues, the key components of building your API security strategy, and the tools that help product security teams keep up with the rapid pace of engineering and application deployments. Good stuff. All right, the second one is called The Secret to Effective Secrets Management. This one is happening Thursday, March 3rd at 3 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Keeper Security. Since IT network secrets unlock access to highly privileged systems and data, securing secrets is just as critical to preventing cyber attacks as securing end user passwords. This webinar is an introduction to Keeper Secrets Management, and during which this webinar attendees will learn the security dangers of secret sprawl and hard-coded embedded credentials, why ad hoc approaches to secrets management don't work, and how Keeper Secrets Management can help organizations implement and maintain secrets management best practices. Another good one. All right, the third one is called Managing Response in the Evolving Cyber Threat Landscape. This one is happening Wednesday, March 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Everbridge. Now, digital transformation has accelerated the growth of business, but as digital companies expand, opportunities for digital systems to become compromised increase. While the industry is focused heavily on monitoring and detection of cyber threats, monitoring and protection alone do not prevent compromises or downtime. It's time to plan for an unexpected attack, putting the tools and automation in place to contain and discover and recover from an attack before it affects your business. Operational resilience is measured from the customer's experience of your service. So what will your customers experience during a cyber attack? This webinar discusses why operational resilience is more than just systems monitoring, how to recognize whether teams are ready to solve major cyber events, why cyber threat containment requires planning, and why automation is required for experts to respond to threats rapidly. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. Please check back with me on Thursday when I will have some more for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's TechStrong TV broadcast, we've got The View with Vizard. Mike Vizard in this one is speaking with Alex Rice, who is the CTO at HackerOne, and Jonathan Hunt, who is the Vice President of Security over at GitLab. And they talk about application security and why it needs to become a continuous DevSecOps process. It's a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Alex Rice, who's CTO for HackerOne, and Jonathan Hunt, who's VP of Security for GitLab. We're going to be talking about all things related to DevSecOps. How do you maybe migrate to this continuous security mindset? And what is going on with our software supply chains? Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
Jonathan, let's start with you. On the face of it, it would seem like everybody gets out of bed in the morning and says, we want to develop some secure code. I don't think I know anybody who said, let's go build something that's fundamentally insecure. And yet, we've been talking about this issue forever and a day. We have been getting people to embrace DevSecOps. We are having lots of conversations about software supply chains. From your perspective, what is the tough thing that we're not able to address? Why is this problem or issue so persistent?
Yeah, I think the challenges really stem from potentially results, right? I think we're all very results oriented. I think that we're somewhat impatient by nature, right? We're nervous about trying new things and implementing new strategies. And I think as DevSecOps continues to evolve from, the very well-known DevOps strategy that we have, as we begin to implement, security scanning or vulnerability mitigation, or start jumping in or start introducing AppSec teams into the process, I think there's, some nervousness or anxiety around seeing that process through, right? Seeing it mature, seeing it evolve, seeing visualizing this strategy that enables the business to not only deploy faster and release more secure code, but one that can be adopted across engineering teams.
Alex, I don't know if a lot of people know who you guys are exactly, so maybe you want to introduce HackerOne a little bit, but what is your perspective on the role of third-party hackers and their relationship with developers, and how do you think that's evolving?
It's a great question, Mike. I think I'll answer it in the context of your last question around why do we still have insecure software despite nobody setting out to do it. I've got a bit of a personal perspective on this, in that we never produce great software in our first version. Doesn't matter what aspect of quality we're talking about, right? Like you only ever get great, high quality, trustworthy software through continuous improvement. Kind of grew up in the early onsets of that. I started programming with in the ancient XP mindset and evolved into Agile. And it's really all about feedback loops and continuous improvement and getting feedback. People are writing code, so the next version can be a little bit better. And my perspective on security is often viewed through that lens. The feedback loops that are available to developers to produce the next slightly more secure version of code have just been miserable, right? They've been non-existent or too slow. It's a pen test that happens a year later, or static analysis that's full of false positives. We just haven't really, as an industry, brought security feedback loops to developers in a way that allows us to continuously improve like we do for all other aspects of software. So I think a big part of what we aim to do here at HackerOne, and what I think can help contribute to more secure software, is to bring those feedback loops to development teams, to developers much earlier in the process, much more actionable, but higher signal. And then I think you're right. Developers want to produce good software. We're aligned for everybody. And a big part of why we've been failing is because we haven't been producing those feedback loops to make the next version a little bit more secure than the first version.
So Jonathan, about those feedback loops, I mean, historically, it's been the security team would, find a bunch of vulnerabilities, load them up in a spreadsheet, attach them in an email, send them out to a bunch of developers who would stare at them and go, now what am I supposed to do with all this stuff? So how do we improve that feedback loop that Alex is talking about? Because fundamentally, it's just been, throw it over the transom and hope for the best.
First of all, what a day. I remember those days where we worked off Excel spreadsheets and had a whole list of vulnerabilities and trying to work with the dev teams. And it was tedious. It was a disaster, to say the least. So thank God we've come so far as we are today, but there's still improvement to be made. Alex touched on that a little bit. And in fact, yes, the way that we work to improve those feedback loops is we create counterparts with the development orgs. I think it starts with the relationship building, right? It's relationship first. And that's what we do. Certainly a strategy that I've employed over my last several roles is let's create those counterparts within our organization. So, here at GitLab, a good example is we have several product stages, and we have an AppSec engineer that is dedicated to each product stage. That AppSec engineer goes to those team standups. That AppSec engineer manages that vulnerability queue. That AppSec engineer performs the AppSec reviews for that code for that team, right? So it starts with a relationship. They are integrated into their CI/CD process holistically from beginning to end, right? They walk along those developers. They provide secure code training. They provide recommendations and guidelines around secure code development. And I think that's what's going to help the feedback loop. After that, we're talking technology. So beyond people, we can assist with technology. Another thing that we do within GitLab is we capitalize and provide. It's definitely we encourage asynchronous communications, right? And with that, it is a lot of ensuring that we are all tied into the same process and tooling and automation pipeline within the technology itself. So there's a lot of asynchronous communication going on, but it is happening through a very standardized process that provides that feedback in real time to each person involved.
Alex, we saw recently this whole Log4j shell crisis. It feels to me, at least, that this is maybe the latest in a series. And every time there's a crisis, somebody says, well, this is it. This is the wake-up call for sure. And then about 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, everybody rolls over and hits the snooze button and goes back to sleep. So do you think that this is changing now? Is this Biden executive order going to have an impact on folks? Or is the mindset changing? Where are we?
I like to take a very long-term view on this. There's not going to be any silver bullets. There's not going to be any singular event that solves everything for here. I view it through the lens of continuous improvement holistically, as well as at individual software level. And I think many organizations are absolutely taking the right lessons from Log4j to level up. And I've seen nothing but great responses from the vast majority of companies that are responding to it and improving on it. Is there a single thing you could point to that would have prevented this from happening, or better? No, but I think we can all take a look at this and ask what's one or two things that we could be doing better in our own organizations to either be better equipped to respond to a situation like this next time around, or avoid it entirely. And it's a complicated process. There's a lot involved here, from vulnerability discovery on the front side to asset inventory to the ability to remediate and update dependencies. And we need regular events like this, regular incidents that we can treat as feedback loops to improve software more holistically. One of the things that I saw our customers doing this time around, which I thought was a major step up from the last time we had a major open source incident like this, if you remember the days of Heartbleed and Shell Shock and the like, is we have quite a few large enterprises being very transparent and open about their response and involving external perspectives and feedback into what they missed. Hyatt Hotels, for example, less than 12 hours after Log4j dropped, they put out an announcement that they think they remediated all of it across their attack surface and invited anyone out there in the public or the security community to find instances of Log4j that they missed, and they found some. And we had quite a few other enterprises follow their lead. All told, there were about there was about $1 million in bounties paid for Log4j instances that were discovered after the enterprise's vulnerability management programs told them they had patched everything. And I think that type of transparency and continuous improvement is a major step forward from where we were a few years ago. Have we solved the problem yet? Is this the wake-up call? I doubt it, Mike, but I see signs of progress everywhere.
All right. Alex just told us that which does not kill us will make us stronger, so that's good. Jonathan, we talk about shifting security left, and part of the challenge, and maybe things are getting better, is that someone writes a piece of code and it's a small amount of code, and then they're like, well, it's only a little bit of code and I won't scan it because that takes too long. And then about 3 or 4 days later, they got this massive base of code that they need to scan, and it takes half a day. And of course, the thing that fails is the thing that immediately fails in the first 25 minutes or so, but everybody plans for 3 hours and they go to lunch or whatever and they come back. So is there a more efficient way to think about scanning? Are we getting better at scanning, and is that experience getting better for the developers?
Yeah, I think scanning is getting better. I think we're seeing a lot more automated tools into the CI/CD pipeline that runs within, minimum, like seconds, right? Or even less, right? And I think what we're doing a little bit better in security, at least from what I've seen in the industry and what I've seen within our own organization, is we are putting the tools and the results closer to the developer. And I think that's key. So you used to kind of you talked a little bit at the beginning of this about like, hey, do you remember we used to put everything in these spreadsheets and we try to go and resolve all these vulnerabilities later, right? And that's how we used to think of things, right? That's how security was in the day, like, oh, let developers go do their thing, let them go produce whatever code and services and features and push everything out to production. Then let's just hope that we can go catch some things and fix it after the fact, right? Well, now the evolution of DevSecOps is by putting the results closer to the developer, resolving findings quicker and faster, releasing code more secure, releasing code more compliant, and all of the benefits of that, right? So we're not only meeting customer requirements, we're reducing risk, right? We're less exposed. And I think that's the path that we need to continue to evolve and improve upon. So I think it's getting better. I think it's getting faster. I think the tools are getting better. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect. Right. And in the end, you've got to have a strategy for identifying vulnerabilities within production. And I think that's where Alex Rice and HackerOne and bug bounty programs come into play, right? We do everything that we can from the security side. We have AppSec teams, we have tools, we have processes, we have, scans, we do pen tests, we do all these things before code gets pushed out into production, right? But once it's out there, it's open to the world, right? And at that point, you need to leverage a strong bug bounty program that's going to tap into the expertise and experience of security researchers across the globe. No security team can employ 20,000 AppSec engineers, but you can use a bug bounty program that has 20,000 security researchers looking at your environment.
Alex, do you think people are more open to bug bounty hunting programs? Because for a while there, they're always like, who are these guys and who's crawling over my code? And can we trust these guys? And how do I know they're not hackers? There's all kinds of cynicism that goes into the space. So how do we vet these people these days? And how do we establish that trust?
Oh, thank you, Mike. I'd love to talk about that. But just one quick follow-up on Jonathan's question. I think that's getting to the heart of it. I'm reminded of it's an anonymous Stack Exchange user from 2011. Avid has a rule of usability that it was roughly like security at the expense of usability comes at the expense of security. And every time I hear us talking about like a developer skipping a scan or a developer not fixing the things from the scan, I always try to bring it back to that not being the developer's fault. It's really a failing of the security tool chain and the usability that made the scan onerous or made it optional to skip the scan. And if we really reimagine the security tool chain from the lens of developer usability, is one of the best things I think can happen to security. It's one of the things I love the most about GitLab. Running a static analysis scan as part of your CI/CD process in GitLab is light years ahead of what running an old static analysis tool used to look like for a developer. And I think making it easy, making it default, making it just the thing that happens without developers really having to think about it or be bothered by it is just massive. On the bug bounty side, we're absolutely seeing it change. And I think the mentality is a little bit less around, there's never really been a question of, oh, if I invite a bunch of people to hack my code, will they find problems with it, right? No matter what context you're talking about, if you ask people to really go deep and evaluate a code, you expect to find flaws in it. The question has really evolved to, are organizations and enterprises mature enough to admit some level of vulnerability, that they're going to have mistakes, that they are going to have missed things? And we're absolutely seeing that changing in the industry. 10 years ago, it was easy to say, security is our top priority, trust us, we've got things under control, but we're not going to talk about it. Nobody buys that anymore, right? Like everybody buys that there is going to be a problem, and the conversation's shifting a lot more to like, show me why I can trust you. Show me how you responded to your last incident. Give me some color as to how you're actually doing this. And I think that broader trend has really benefited collaboration with the security community, because when you're able to start having those conversations about what you're doing and what you want to do better next time around, it builds trust with your end users. But it also facilitates collaboration with the community. And I think bounty programs have been a major beneficiary of that. And consumers benefit as well, because if you are able to have those conversations and collaborate with the security community, you will produce better software, and your business and your consumers will benefit from it.
Right. Jonathan, to Alex's point, are we really shifting left? Because I'm not sure the developers have the patience or desire or inclination to go learn all the security nuances, or can we just lean left and do that through the CI/CD platform, which will then automatically discover these issues at the point where the build is being created and kind of take that off the shoulders of the developers themselves?
I think we have to do both, honestly. I think inherently, if we just write secure code from the beginning, and that's easier said than done. I'm not pointing fingers here at all, not doing that. I mean, code is code, right? But if you write the secure code in the beginning, right? Let me put it this way. If you write vulnerability-free code in the beginning, well, then you're not going to find anything. It's going to go faster. You're going to move better, produce, what we like to call more secure code, quicker releases, all these things, right? But that's just not the reality, right? So at the same time, static analysis scanners, dynamic analysis scanners, fuzzing, linting, all these things, right? I mean, it in itself is still machine logic, right? It's still not going to be perfect. You're still not going to find everything and every flaw and every bug. And that is why we use bug bounty programs. And that is why we have AppSec teams and AppSec engineers. And this is why we review code. It's more than just, even PCI, even SOC, even all the FedRAMP, even all these compliance requirements. It's more than just like running a scan. It's like, do you review the code, right? Do you still put some eyes on it? So I think it's two parts. One is, yes, we need to ensure that we have the right tools in place, the automation in place to provide faster and more efficient results to make our teams and business more effective. But we also have to help the developers understand vulnerabilities, secure coding practices, like maybe like best practices, OWASP top 10, vulnerability identification, how to resolve that quicker. And honestly, something that we don't typically talk about, and something that's kind of like near and dear to my heart is, and Alex was kind of getting to it a little bit, is like, I also think that we do have more work to do in incentivizing, right? I think developers ultimately, I'm not entirely sure that we're incentivizing development teams to produce secure code. I think we're incentivizing them to meet deadlines. I think we're incentivizing to produce the most features or to get the most code out or whatever to meet these project milestones. I'm not so sure that we're doing and that we're sort of like ingraining into the organization and getting the level of support that we need to say like, hey, maybe that performance review should include how many vulnerabilities, was identified in that code. Now, I don't want to do a headhunting exercise. I'm not saying that, but I just think maybe from like a team's perspective, from a group perspective, maybe there's something there, right?
Mm-hmm. Hey, Mom, I got the most secure code award for 2021. That would be awesome. But Jonathan, let me follow up with that once more. Do you think AI will maybe help save us from ourselves because we can automate more of these functions? And maybe the task is not something a human can do in the first place. So maybe we need to look to the machines more.
I'm glad you asked that question. I've been wanting to state this. Yes, it's going to help. Again, it's a matter of efficiency. It's a matter of automation. It's a matter of improving our processes. But I think it would be a big mistake for people to rely only on AI and automated scripts and SAS scans and DAS scans and just say like, well, if it didn't find it, it's not there and we're good, right? I still think there's some human element. Still machines and scanners and even automated pen tests. I still think that they struggle to replicate complex chain attacks, right? I don't think that the tools have come so far that they're able to laterally move across environments and look for flaws and look for logic and look for exposed tokens and keys and know how to capture that and grep that out and like paste it back into an attack, right? It's the complex chain attacks that we're seeing. Those are the ones that are making into the news, right? It's not someone ran a vulnerability scan, found an S3, and all of a sudden now 3 Fortune 500s are compromised. Those days are long gone.
Alex, how about the bad guys? Are the bad guys getting smarter? Are they getting savvier looking for this code? It also seems to me maybe they're just making the news and I'm more aware of it, but there's more 0-day vulnerabilities. And are the bad guys getting better at exploiting those things as they become disclosed? What's going on the opposite team?
Oh, I love this framing of it. So much of what we do is rooted in this adversarial nature, right? None of these vulnerabilities would matter if there weren't adversaries out there that are doing things. And I think one of the really interesting but also challenging things for the industry is just how diverse the bad guy group has gotten over the past year. You've always had a range of motives of things that malicious actors might do with vulnerabilities, but it's really expanded dramatically in the past. And just to illustrate that, you have malicious actors that behave almost like businesses on the other side. When you look at ransomware and the type of attacks that are happening there, it's very predictable, very scripted. There's ROI on the other side. There's people with budgets. It's run like an actual enterprise. And you can very much reason about what those adversaries will do against a particular piece of technology if given the chance. And it ranges all the way to much more sophisticated actors that are specifically targeting individuals that bring an entirely different range of things after you. And you used to be able to have relatively straightforward threat models, to have one or two that you'd pay attention to, and you'd build your software defenses around that. But more and more enterprises don't have that luxury. The threat models have gotten so diverse, they've gotten so complex that too many enterprises these days are faced with the challenge of defending against every particular type of threat out there, because so much more of the business has gone online, because so much more of it is now powered by software, and because the criminal adversaries have gotten so much more diverse that the complexity has just gone way up there. So I have a mixed minds about this, Mike. We're really understanding what the criminals are doing and paying attention to trends there is worth it. But overcorrecting too much towards one particular threat actor or threat group has really bitten more people than I think it's helped. And I think most enterprises today need to really have a holistic understanding of their attack surface, really have a holistic understanding about the threats that are against that attack surface. And I think for most businesses, once you go through that analysis, you realize that the range of threat actors that you're exposed to is so diverse that really getting down to the fundamentals of building securely from the start is where most of us need to be going.
Alex, let me follow up on that, because I do feel like we are so focused on hunting for potential vulnerabilities, and the bad guys, I think, are pretty much laughing at us because they're like, why would I go to all the effort to go do that when a simple SQL injection attack will do the trick and I can just use my standard stuff? And why am I going to, go through 19 levels of cartwheels when I can do what I need to do in about 3 seconds?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a counterpoint to that at all. It's gotten harder. We need to make it harder, but your adversary, no matter who they are, will always find the path of least resistance to get there. But it varies based on the threat actor, right? Where you can reason about your defenses because of that. With ransomware, for example, that operates off of a clear ROI on the other side and is resource constrained, it very much goes after the easiest to find low-hanging fruit pieces. And it's one of those, like the old camping adage of I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun the other campers, really applies in the ransomware world. We're going after low-hanging fruits and vulnerabilities is one of the best things you can do for ransomware, because you just have to be a little bit more secure than the average enterprise out there, and you'll fail quite well against attacks like that. On the other hand, you almost certainly have risks in your business that are more susceptible to very targeted attacks, where taking a kind of a catch-all vulnerability approach doesn't work at all. And that's kind of the point I'm getting back to with diversity, is that most enterprises have this range of threats against them that if you go all in on any one, you leave some major blind spots open. But I agree with your point there, is that for most criminal adversaries, they don't care about our broad set of controls. They'll find the path of least resistance. And the question is, how many of those did you leave open?
Last question, Jonathan. What's your best advice to folks based on everything we just talked about? What do you wish that more folks would just do as it regarding the fundamentals?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you kind of said it. You got to have the fundamentals down, right? We have to have the fundamentals down of supply chain, right? We have to have the fundamentals down of configuration management. We have to have the fundamentals down of AppSec reviews, right? We can't just, I'd rather have a number of processes built across the organization that's, maybe the 80-20 rule, than to have complete blind spots, right? Where I'm not even looking at third-party vendors, or I'm not even looking at, I'm just expecting this scan to run against the code and I'm not checking it. I'm not reviewing the code. I'm just going to trust it, right? Make sure, I would say, go back, make sure that you have the fundamental policies and processes in place and that you're following those, and then look to mature those programs.
All right, cool. Folks, you heard it here first. If your code looks more secure than the next guy's, chances are the criminals will go somewhere else. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that wraps up today's TechStrong TV I hope you enjoyed today's conversations as much as I did. We have a couple things going up, want to let you know about before I close things down for good today. First things first, we've got the Snyk Know Your Code Open Source and Supply Chain Summit happening right now as we speak, folks. March 1st, it is a virtual event, and it is a great one. It's a very relevant topic, and we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for that event. It's a short one, so I think it's only a half-day event, but it's totally worth checking out. And then in 2 days, on March 3rd, we've got the Salt Security API Security Summit, another great topic, very relevant today, and another fantastic lineup of speakers for that event. Those are both virtual events, and I highly encourage you to check them out. If you're too late for the Snyk Know Your Code event to check it out live, it's going to be available on demand, as will the Salt Security API Security Summit. You can register for both of those events at TechStrongEvents.com. You can check out the lineup of speakers for both of them and the agenda, and register, as I said, for either the live event or on demand, and you'll have access to all of the conversations, presentations throughout. We've also got a couple live events coming up at the end of the month. We're kicking things off with the TechStrong live events. We've got DevOps Cloud Native Live and Cybersecurity Live. Those are kicking off in Atlanta. They're both one-day events. DevOps Cloud Native is happening on March 29th, and Cybersecurity Live is happening on March 30th. Again, you can go to TechStrong Events to check out the lineup for those and register. We're going to have those one-day kind of roadshow style events happening throughout the country throughout the year. So check out the lineup. We've got a lot of them coming down the pike. And then we also, just a quick reminder, have our Initech events. Those are our conferences, one-day conferences that are devoted to more general IT topics, but also including DevOps, Cloud Native, and security. Those are happening regionally, and including Dallas, Houston, Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C., and Austin throughout 2022. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for at least one or two of those live events, but certainly do check out the agenda. All of the lineup, all of the events, the lineup is on TechStrongEvents.com, both live and virtual, or I should say live in person and virtual. So go check out the calendar and see what's coming your way. All right, I will be back on Thursday with a new TechStrong TV broadcast. And until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.